What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the PFF NFL show. Here for the grades release show, week 6 in the NFL. We're going to take a look at every single game that we saw on the Sunday slate, give you our top 5 graded players for every team, and then give you, the stats that told the entire story, the most impressive, the most disappointing, all that good stuff. Dalton Wasserman here with me. Dalton, how you doing, my friend?
Fantastic. Another fun weekend of football. We got a fun Monday night coming, too, with a lot of stories as well.
You say fun, and I know that you maybe wish you could use a different adjective as a Jets fan, maybe torturous, especially because the Mets are on as well.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to get into the Jets. Well, actually, we're not going to get into the Jets here on the show, so I'll do it here at the very top. Very quickly. Expectations for the Jets? Don't give me a dissertation here. You got to keep it short. But thoughts on the Jets? New play call. Robert Saleh's not there. What do you think we're seeing today?
I think they're going to come out with a good amount of energy. I do, and I think some of these Bills injuries are going to be a problem for them, especially if James Cook is out.
And that was your big thing, right? When we talked about the New York Jets, you said, "Hey, the slow starts, all that's what needs to be different." So you actually believe that we're going to get some new juice for the team?
I think so.
Is it because you actually think the team made the right moves? Or do you think it's just the automatic, you change head coaches kind of bump that we see teams
It's
get?
weird because this is kind of unprecedented for a team that still has playoff expectations. And if they win tonight, they're in first place. That's just the reality. We have not seen teams very often fire their coach before their season's really over. You usually wait till you're mathematically eliminated or close to it. This is kind of different. So I think they come out and play with a jolt, and I really think they're going to put an emphasis on getting Breece Hall going because they're not going to the playoffs unless they get him going.
All right, let's get into these games. I do agree with you. I think this is going to be fun. The injuries with Buffalo are going to make that a very interesting game. But we're here to review, not preview. And so you guys can talk amongst yourselves in the chat if you actually want to talk about the New York Jets. We're going to talk about the Jags and the Bears as the first game that we saw in the Sunday slate. This was the London game, the overseas game that we saw yesterday. Chicago put it on them, 35-16. It continues to be a disappointing year from the Jacksonville Jaguars. And we'll give the Bears their kudos. We'll talk about their top 5 graded players first because that's what we got to do. They won the game. They deserve the honor there. The number 1 graded player, minus quarterbacks, because I know we're about to get that. Safety Kevin Byard, 85.3. Overall grade in this game, edge rusher Montez Sweat had an 81.5. Offensive tackle Darnell Wright with a 78.2. Safety Elijah Hicks with a 78.1. And then cornerback Kyler Gordon with a 77.2. Caleb Williams, number 1 overall pick, would have been number 1 on this list had we not been separating quarterbacks, because if you're new here, that's what we do. We separate the quarterbacks so we can talk about them anyways, but I know we're about to dig into Caleb Williams here in a few minutes about what could be most impressive about him. But on the other side of things for Jacksonville, one player played really well, and that was safety Andre Sisco. And, he had some choice words after the game. I don't know if you saw that, Dalton, where I asked him, what's going on with the team? And amongst other things, within his answer, he said, feels like there's a lot of quit on this team, which is not a good thing to say only 6 weeks into the season. Tight end Brenton Strange, he was next on the list, but Andre Sisco, 90.3 overall grade, an elite, fantastic grade, and then it drops all the way to a 74.3 for Brenton Strange. Number 3, Josh Hines-Allen with a 72.0, offensive tackle Cam Robinson, an equal 72.0, and then tight end Evan Ingram, a fantastic day. The entire passing offense was going through Evan Ingram, and his return 69.7. Trevor Lawrence, a 77.6 overall grade. It felt like outside of that one long drive that the Jags had at the beginning of the game, it was just all Bears from that point out. What was the stat that told the story here, Dalton?
For me, I think what we've seen the last 3 weeks after the game in Indianapolis where the Bears just threw the football way too much. I think Williams had, 58 pass attempts in that game? Somewhere
high
around
50s.
Way
Can't remember
too
exactly
much.
what it was, but yeah.
The last 3 weeks, they've gotten under center more. They've put an emphasis on running the ball, and they figured out how they can run the ball. Okay, so the stat for me on a baseline level is 5.2 yards per carry. That's the best of the season for the Bears. Finding balance was huge. Getting the ball out of Williams' hand less than it was is big time. Okay, big thing for me. Offensive line, still not spectacular, right? We know they're not great at running between the tackles. So what are we doing? We're going to run off tackle. We're going to get back to Shane Waldron, basic outside zone, some toss sweep. We can pull some guards out there, kind of pin pull stuff, get off tackle. 5.3 yards per carry off tackle is also a season high. And their offensive line, when they did get off tackle, had an 81.7 run blocking grade. Look, this team is loaded at the skill positions, and DeAndre Swift has been really good the last couple weeks. They've mixed in Roschon Johnson too. The receivers are obviously great. Keenan Allen, I thought, looked the best at any point, the best in this game that he has at any point this year, but they're loaded with athletes that they want to use out in space. Get outside, right? Don't make this offensive line try to maul people on the inside, because that's not their strong suit, right? They are not going to line up and run power, in the B gap and run people over. That's not it. And Caleb Williams, honestly, the way he operates, think about back at USC, getting the ball to playmakers in space, right? That's what you're getting right now. But it starts with the run game. Running off tackle, getting Williams on the bootleg, especially from under center. And then when we want to pick up the tempo and space things out, then we can use the quick game to space things out. Caleb Williams had a season-low average depth of target. This is where it's getting to. The Bears, it's more of that, almost like the Chiefs, right? Where it's like just that quick, get the ball to somebody in space, play kind of basketball, let Caleb be the point guard and distribute the ball. But to me, it starts with getting under center more the last 3 weeks, figuring out what works in their run game and sticking to it.
Yeah, just for conversation's sake, I'll skip to my most impressive, and it was a little bit of what you talked about there. It was the Bears' pass game diversity to me. I mean, all of the different options that Caleb Williams felt very, very comfortable going to. Cole Kmet, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, DeAndre Swift, Roschon Johnson, DJ Moore, all of those players that I just named had more than 2 targets in the game and at least 2 catches in this game for 20 yards, 25 yards, 28 yards, 40 yards, 41, 70. You had the 2 touchdowns to Kmet, the 2 touchdowns to Keenan Allen. Obviously, having Keenan Allen out there and healthy is huge for them, especially with that veteran presence. But it was just the overall diversity to me of how comfortable Caleb Williams felt throwing the ball to anybody, right? Because I think that we see this, I think, a lot around the league, not just with young quarterbacks. They get very fixated on one guy. It's like, okay, this is the wide receiver one, and you need to keep this player happy. And it does feel like everyone's sort of just all in it together. Now, has it looked perfect for the Bears this season? Obviously, it hasn't. But to me, that was the most impressive. Is like you said, Caleb not feeling like he has to be this Superman type of a player with a huge average depth of target like what we saw at USC. Very comfortable being that point guard, being that Rajon Rondo, that distributor. Let the other dudes shine. They can get the double digits, and we're going to continue to win football games. And I think that Caleb Williams, obviously, I'm not trying to say that he didn't have a good game himself, but as a facilitator, that's something that you really wanted to see from him. My side that told the story, I'll go the opposite side of praising the Bears' pass game. The Jags secondary, I mean, it is not what it needs to be. I mentioned that Andre Cisco, their safety, after the game, he got the one interception in this one. And then after the game, he's talking about, hey, you can tell when we're all playing together. You feel that confidence when you're out on the field that you know that this guy's going to be in the right spot, this guy's going to lock down this dude, whatever it is, and you feed off of that. That's what chemistry in the secondary really is. We talk about chemistry on the offensive line, chemistry in the secondary just as paramount, honestly, because there's even more ground to cover. He said afterwards, you can tell that we're not in sync. And he sort of was saying, like, we don't really know where everybody's going to be because not everybody's giving it their best effort. And anytime that you're not running 100%, well, then I can't count on you being where you need to be if you're not running 100%, if you're not giving your all. Obviously, I'm sitting up here in the desk. I'm not on the field playing these games. So I don't want people to be like, oh, look at him. He's accusing these guys of not playing. I'm just taking the words of the teammate who was in front of the microphones in the camera yesterday trying to call people out because it's not pretty in Jacksonville right now. When you look at Cisco, he had an 89.5 coverage grade. Nobody else was above a 64. 64 was the next highest. You go all the way from 89.5 to 64, it cannot be that big of a gap. It's got to be a lot better, even with some of the guys in and out of the lineup like we've seen through the first 6 weeks. So for the Jags, it's a lot of things. There's inconsistencies on offense that I've talked about over the last couple of weeks, but specifically, now we're getting the defensive side. Now, unfortunately, it feels like we're talking about the Jags as, okay, Trevor Lawrence, kind of depending on where you are with the Trevor Lawrence discussion, that could be a coin flip, but you could say he's a good player. Josh Hines-Allen's a good player. How many other players are you really depending on every single week? And I think that's now the problem with the Jags is it feels way too inconsistent with them. And this week it was the coverage. So
yeah, I agree with that. And I think the other thing that plays into it too, they've continued to run a top 3 rate of man coverage. And I just have to wonder, even if you do have guys lagging a little bit in the effort, if they're just not believing, because it's been a tough start. It was a tough end of last season. It's a tough start to this season. You got guys trying to play one-on-one with Keenan Allen, with DJ Moore, with Roma Dunze. It's not that easy anyway, even with with those guys as talented as they are. So it could be a scheme thing. It could be it could be either way. The Jags are just not getting it done right now, really on either side of the ball. And they really, the way this Bears defense is playing as well, they couldn't afford to give up this many points.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the chat right now. October said this. Trevor Lawrence had to throw 4 touchdown passes on one drive before one of his guys would catch it, and that just gets right into my disappointing with the Jags wide receivers. Christian Kirk, Brian Thomas Jr. even, Gabe Davis, all of them at a drop. The whole group, it just doesn't feel like they're playing focused every single game. And now we're obviously having these conversations of how much longer does Doug Peterson have? Because once you start losing the locker room, once you start losing focus, that's truly when moving on from a head coach becomes something that you're talking about here. You talked about that with Robert Saleh here on the show over the last couple of weeks. Connor Rogers on the NFL Stock Exchange, our other NFL draft show that we have, he's talked about the Jets and how it's like it just has not looked they just have not looked like a focused team. Now you're looking at guys not running their hardest in the secondary, drops all around when it comes to your talented wide receivers. That's focus stuff. That's discipline stuff. That's motivation stuff. That's something you got to be able to do when you're a pro. And that was my most disappointing is the Jags wide receiver. So just to chime in with the chat and agree with the chat who was talking about this as well. But what about you? Most impressive, most disappointing? We talked a lot about the Jags. You got anything for the Bears on this one?
Most impressive is absolutely Caleb Williams. This was by far the best game he's had so far.
Hey, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you.
It's going to be a battle for Rookie of the Year. It'll be a battle. No, I mean, he was just spectacular. And the biggest thing to me is the more that we see him, we know he can make the big improvised plays, right? We know he's an amazing athlete. He can do the off-platform stuff. But more and more you're seeing him comfortable within the system, all right? When he didn't move off his spot, which was the vast majority of the time in this game, 22 of 26 for 199 yards and all 4 touchdowns. He was in rhythm. He was staying in the pocket. He was getting to his second and third read. And when there were times to improvise, then he would do it. But it wasn't very often. This is the design for Caleb Williams in this game. And I know Jacksonville's struggling on defense, but this is still a rookie playing his, 6th game in the NFL. Mm-hmm. You're talking about a guy who's finding a rhythm within the system with the changes in Shane Waldron's system. And I'll be honest with you, I like that you mentioned the diversity in the pass game because it's not just diversity in target share and things like that. It's diversity in concept, too. There's quick games sometimes in the gun with 10 or 11 personnel. There's 2 tight ends on the field. We're running play action off it. We're running bootlegs like Shane Waldron likes to run. There's a lot of different things that he's starting to pick up in the offense now. I like that it's a bit more conservative. It's in control, and he's playing. This was by far the most in control that he has played, and he did not feel the need to go out there and hit home runs, right? And then you see some of the special throws, right? The kind of back shoulder up the seam for the touchdown. I forget who he threw it to. The fade ball to Keenan Allen to the left. That was just an absolutely perfect throw. Then you start to see the special throws, but he's got to do things within the system, within structure, and he did that better than he has in any other game this year.
Yeah. Anybody who didn't get that when I was sort of sarcastically clapping for you, it's because you're a Jaden Daniels guy. You were a Jaden Daniels QB1 guy, and I'm just giving you a little bit of crap because you believe that it would take a little bit longer for Caleb Williams, and I think a lot of people thought that as well. But I think it's a really important thing to remember. Hey, we're 6 weeks into the season. Now we are seeing, Gordon is saying this in the chat as well. Hey, we're physically seeing improvement from Caleb Williams. Week 6. That's what you want to see. That's what you want to see from this dude. And so I think Bears fans have all the reason to be excited about what they saw yesterday. It's tough going across the pond, as they say, being able to play a different game, totally different time zone, especially them coming from, Central Time as well. So it's not like East Coast time coming straight over. So there's a lot of things that you're adjusting to. You're playing a team that's really desperate in Jacksonville and also came out swinging, right? That first drive they had was beautiful by Jacksonville, and yet they stayed calm, they were collected, and the Bears were the better team for all 4 quarters. Most disappointing here before we move on.
Real quick, the Jags pass rush, too, just not there. We saw Trayvon Walker dominate the Colts last week. The whole team really didn't bring it this week. 58.4 team pass rush grade. Got 16 pressures, but 8 of them either cleanup or unblocked pressures. 3 sacks, but only 5 yards lost on those sacks for the Bears. Caleb Williams kind of holding the ball too long on only a couple of occasions. He was spectacular all day. A couple times he held it too long. Then the Jags got there, but they had a hard time winning up front, getting any pressure on him either.
Yeah, I agree. Just to chime into the chat before we move on to the next game, they're talking about the Bears defense, giving them kudos. Absolutely should be giving the Bears kudos. Because,
are they the best secondary in football right now?
Well, I was just about to say, before this game, if you looked at before this game, they were third in our database for overall coverage grade as a team at an 82.9, and just the defensive backs, so just the corners and the safeties, they were second in the NFL. So both of those categories extremely high for this team. They had 5 interceptions going into this one, 10 forced incompletions. This is an aggressive unit, and I wondered how they were going to play against a Jacksonville team that likes to push the ball deep down the field. Well, advantage Chicago. So if Caleb is playing the way that he is, and the defense is playing the way that they have been over the first 6 weeks, you're really talking about a team that can contend against anybody, any given week, and one that's definitely got a chance at a good postseason berth in a couple of months. So next game, let's go to Jaden Daniels.
There it is.
Okay, so Jaden Daniels, the next one, his matchup against the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens come away victorious in this one, 30-23. Score was a little bit closer and in the end than sort of how it felt, but Ravens get a big win in this one with 2 fantastic quarterbacks going head-to-head, although it was what happened around the quarterbacks that I think made the difference in this one. Let's get to the top fives. Let's get to the top fives in this game. We'll start with the Baltimore Ravens since they won the game. Wide receiver Zay Flowers, hell of a day from Zay Flowers. An elite 90.2 overall grade in this one. Tight end Mark Andrews. He lives, fantasy football players. We actually got some Mark Andrews targets and a Mark Andrews touchdown in this one. He was the second highest graded player in this game, 85.8. Defensive tackle Travis Jones coming along in his young career at an 83.7 at number 3 on this list. Superstar safety Kyle Hamilton with an 82.5, and then cornerback Marlon Humphrey with an 80.6. Lamar Jackson in this game with an 82.3 overall grade. Flipping sides to Washington, wide receiver Terry McLaurin was on the top of the list with a 78.6. Cornerback Mike Samers still got an interception in this one. He was at number 2 with a 75.0. It feels like the guy who has control of the fountain of youth, Bobby Wagner, number 3 on this list, 74.8. He's just had solid PFF grades every single week still in his veteran age. Wide receiver Noah Brown with a 74.0, and then offensive tackle Cornelius Lucas with a 72.6. Quarterback Jaden Daniels with a 78.6 in this one. Stat that told the story here, Dalton. What do we got?
For me, it's just in general, Washington's pass defense. It's still, to me, been the biggest kryptonite. I think they've gotten better in run defense the last couple weeks. There were moments in this game where their run defense looked good. I know Derrick Henry, eventually, when he keeps punching the wall, it just cracks down. It comes down eventually, right? But I look at Washington this week. The pass rush was getting better the last couple weeks. Now it kind of regressed down. 53.3 team pass rush grade in this game. Dorrance Armstrong, who'd been arguably their best pass rusher, got hurt in the second quarter. Only 3 pressures all day that got to Lamar Jackson in 2.5 seconds or less. It just was not, they weren't getting there. And then on the back end, 41.3 coverage grade. Mike Sainris still had the interception early. He was the only player above a 60 coverage grade for Washington. That's really the biggest problem to me. 10 explosive pass plays allowed is they just still, even in their wins, have not been covering well, and it's a part where Dan Quinn, I don't know if it's the right mix of guys or the right mix of scheme or both, or they just have to get a better pass rush to succeed on the back end, but you're seeing Washington, they're going to be in a lot of high-scoring games like this. We've seen it for 6 weeks now. The only game where I think they played really, really good defense was the Cardinals game, and even that, they were better in the trenches than they were on the back end. I just think you're seeing it's the weaknesses, right? If you think they're going to make the playoffs, if you think they're going to win the NFC East, that's cool. If you think Jaden Daniels might be in the MVP race, cool. But they have to make stops at some point, right? I think that's really what this game came down to, because obviously you see from the grading, Jaden Daniels, I thought, played very well in this game, considering the pressure. He's on the road. They're against one of the best teams in football. He was really good. They just have to support him. They can't win games giving up 30 points every week.
Yeah, and it was disappointing because in weeks 4 and 5, their coverage grades were better, right? Through the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season, they had one of the lowest team coverage grades in the NFL. And then these past 2 weeks, it was great. And then certainly last week against the Browns, which I understand the Browns offense is not good. But 70.6 coverage grade as a team, you go, okay, are they turning the page? Because the week before against the Cardinals, like you mentioned, that was their highest season grade to that point, and then they eclipsed it the next week in week 5. But this past week against the Ravens, 41.3 team grade. It was the second lowest overall team coverage grade that they've had so far this season since their week 1 loss to the Buccaneers, and it was also the second highest EPA per play allowed that they have had. So a little bit of regression here. I think that certainly went into it. I think the rushing also went into it, right? We were talking about what a fantastic team that the Commanders were running the football going into this game, that it was going to be strength on strength when it came to who was going to run the ball better. You know, when you look at weeks 1 through 5 going into this week for the Commanders, 79.1 rushing grade, 5.3 yards per carry average, 178.4 yards per game total on the ground. And so this was their bread and butter. This is what they wanted to do. And unfortunately, the Ravens were ready for it. So instead of a 79.1 rushing grade, which was their average, 55.8 rushing grade this past week. I said 2.3 yards per carry average going into this one, 2.8 against the Ravens, 52 total yards rushing as opposed to 178.4 as their average going into this one. So simply put, I think the Ravens were just the better team, right? The Ravens were just the better team. And obviously the Commanders are a great story. I think they're trending in the right direction. I think they are ahead of the curve more so than people believed they would be at this point in time of the season, with a lot of new players on that roster, with a rookie quarterback and a new head coach. But they just ran into a team that's more seasoned, was ready for it, more experienced. And so I think that's why. It was close in the end, but the Ravens were able to take away what the Commanders wanted to do. And I don't think the Commanders quite have the pieces to change their strength, right? Sometimes you look at teams and you go, okay, this is what we do well. Because I think that's not a difficult part for teams going into the season. When you are an NFL franchise, no matter what roster you look at, you can look at your team and say, this is what we do well, whether it's quick game, deep passes, running the ball between the tackles, running the ball, like whatever it is. You can look at your strength. But the best teams in the NFL, they have their strength, and then when teams to take away what they're most potent at, they can go to another one. They go, okay, here's our adjustment. And they got the players and the chemistry and the coaching to be able to do it. Washington's still getting there with that part. We saw a couple of weeks where Jaden Daniels was able to take over. The run game in this team was able to take over. And you go, okay, this is the strength of the Commanders. But I think in this game specifically, when the Ravens took that away, there wasn't enough. There wasn't quite enough for them to punch back and stay in with this Ravens team, and I think that will come for the Commanders. Most impressive in this one.
Second week in a row, I'm going Zay Flowers. 9 catches.
Somebody had to do it.
132 yards. 7 of those 9 catches went for first downs, a 90 receiving grade. If he's going, because the biggest question I had for the Ravens coming into the year was wide receiver. It was Zay Flowers and then who else? Well, obviously the who else is 3 really good tight ends with Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely and Charlie Kolar, right? And the running game and everything they do. But somebody on the perimeter has to win. And if Zay Flowers is going to level up the way he has the last 2 weeks, these are easily the 2 best back-to-back games he's played in his career. Flowers is a guy who's, I think you're seeing him to separate downfield more. The screen early in the game, I think, really made a statement when he took that for 50-some yards. I think this is the guy. If they're going to use him like this is now when you start to convince yourself that Baltimore can win the AFC this year and they can beat the Chiefs. Because he showed it in the playoff game against the Chiefs last season. I think he had 115 yards in that game. He can be the best player on the field. He can separate downfield. He can separate after the catch. He can make people miss. He can do all those things. They just have to use him accordingly. I think the more this target share for Zay Flowers leans in his direction, the better that they're going to be. Because now they have a perimeter threat. They obviously have the 2 backfield threats. You've got 3 threats at tight end. Are they real thin at wide receiver? Yeah, they are. Maybe they could trade for one more. But Flowers, regardless, needs to be the number 1 guy like he's been the last 2 weeks. I think he's the reason that Baltimore's looked so good on offense the last 2 weeks is because he gives them that balance. He's their most skilled offensive player on the perimeter. And you could argue he's an X factor in their Super Bowl chances. I really do.
Yeah. Chat pointing out, I wanted to go make sure that I went back to this when we talked about the run struggles with Washington. No Brian Robinson in this game. I do think that was definitely a factor. But I also don't want that to take away from the game plan that I feel like Baltimore had to really
the Ravens
what they were doing.
Straight up, the Ravens have more answers than the Commanders do. The Commanders we got to get rolling on offense. We have to be good enough on defense. We need some guys to step up every week. But the Ravens are just a more balanced football team. And I think the encouraging part for Washington, again, is that they went into one of the toughest environments in football against one of the best teams in football with a really good defense when they're rolling. And Jaden Daniels was still really good, and he was still their best player on the field. So I don't think they should be discouraged at all, really, with the way that they played in this game. They just have a super young defense that's, again, trying to build from being the team that gave up the most points in the NFL last season.
Yeah, my most impressive, I want to talk about Mark Andrews in this one because he deserves it, right? I think that a lot of fantasy football owners drafting Mark Andrews pretty early in their fantasy drafts for the tight end position. And look, it has not been the strongest start to him for his career, but I do want to say this. You look at the last 2 weeks, they're pretty solid by him. So I feel like this was just fantasy football people freaking out a little bit too much.
Well, no tight ends are putting up numbers in fantasy this year. Nobody.
Defenses are, little chess game.
I finally got a big day out of Laporta yesterday.
Nice. Yeah. I did too on my bench.
See that? Oh, did you?
Yeah.
No. Yeah, he's a must start. What are you doing?
I have Trey McBride.
How do you have two must start? Did you draft them both early?
Yeah.
You're a sicko.
Yeah, two tight ends.
You're a two tight end guy.
Yeah, two tight end strat.
Okay.
Yeah, we're running 12 personnel.
Oh, I took
the lineup doesn't let me do it, but in my head we're running 12 personnel.
I took Laporta and ran with it.
I'm taking a stand.
Oh, okay.
I'm making sure that we can get the heavy personnel in fantasy football.
Oh, okay. Are you in a two tight end league?
No.
Is that a thing?
No. Well, no, I'm not. We're getting on a tangent here, but no, I'm not in a two tight end league for that one specifically. But I am in a league where you get to play an offensive player as well as a flex. So sometimes
you're just
you can
two
draft,
tight end guy,
right?
Okay,
right.
That takes a real.
I think that when teams have good tight ends, they feed them a lot in the NFL. That's the difference. Sometimes, okay, am I going to pick wide receiver 2, or am I going to pick like a tight end 1 of another team? I'm going to take the tight end 1.
It's one way to do it.
That's my strategy, and I'm 1-4 because of it. Look, I think that Mark Andrews had a really good performance yesterday. 4 targets, 3 catches, 66 receiving yards, and a touchdown. 81.8 receiving grade. Now, what we see at the bottom of the screen here, this is sort of what I'm talking about here. He's still got a 21.7 threat percentage in each of the last 2 games, which, if you're new here, threat percentage, how often are you targeted per routes that you are running? And 21.7, that's not that far away from his career average, which is normally somewhere right around 25%. So I think a lot of people are freaking out about Mark Andrews and everything, but certainly over the last 2 weeks, they're going to get this guy involved. It's just a matter of they also have Charlie Kolar. They also have Isaiah Likely. They're going to get those guys in the mix. So Mark Andrews is still going to be there. Is he going to be a lion's share tight end like he has been in the past? No, but this is still going to be a great player for them, especially down the stretch. And I wanted to shout him out as a most impressive for getting off the schneid there a little bit. Most disappointing for me, it piggybacks off what you talked about with the coverage with the Commanders. Emmanuel Forbes, their first-round pick from 2 years ago, healthy scratch in this game. I mean, what are we doing with Emmanuel Forbes at this point? When he was coming through the draft, he had a lot of interceptions, a lot of plays on the ball, very quick player, good length, almost unprecedented low body percentage, where like mass percentage, you do not have guys who play in the NFL at 165, whatever he's listed. I don't know what they have him officially listed at, but he is tiny. And Ron Rivera, they took him in the first round anyways. Took him above Christian Gonzalez, I will remind people, which was nuts. But what do you do with him now that he's a healthy scratch? Clearly, he is just not a player that they're going to play on this team. So it's most disappointing for me because even though I was skeptical about taking Emmanuel Forbes in the first round, I still thought this guy could be an NFL player. And being a healthy scratch on a team that is one of the lowest graded coverage teams in the NFL means that you're not even a part of the developmental plans, I don't feel like, at this point. So he's the most disappointing.
This regime is not tied to him by any means.
No.
They're not the ones who drafted him. And I think you see that often in the more and more often in the league now, where if it's a new regime with a player that's drafted under the old one, they don't feel the need to play him, right? If Dan Quinn feels like he's not good enough to get on the field, then so be it. But no, it's for them. It's disappointing to see because he is talented. You mentioned FBS record holder for pick sixes in his career. I mean, he's a guy who can make plays on the ball, but the fundamentals you could see it last year. It's just not there, and I guess Dan Quinn agrees with that, so he's just not going to play him.
Chad saying, is he a trade candidate? He's got to be at this point.
I would think so. Sure.
Who's trading for him?
Oh, and there's always teams that need corners. But he's such a young guy that even like a developing team, why not a team like Jacksonville give up something and just go, okay, it's another corner. We can at least give him a shot. Still a rookie deal, still incredibly
I wonder
young.
if they still have PTSD from C.J. Henderson,
or just whoever. It doesn't matter. I mean, any team can use depth at corner. I mean, there's never enough cornerbacks in the NFL.
Chat, help us out. If Emmanuel Forbes is on the trade block, which it feels like he kind of is at this point, where's he getting traded to? Let us know. Some trade candidates. Who needs corners? You tell us. You tell us who needs corners. Did you do most disappointing?
Just got a quick thing. Frankie Louvu, he's a really important player for this defense. Just wasn't great in this game. Only one unblocked pressure when he did rush the passer. 46.1 overall. Tough day for him. I mean, when you give up 30 points, people have tough days, including your good players. And Louvu in prior weeks had been really, really good for them. And I mentioned last week how he's a big schematic piece for them. Just didn't get in a rhythm in this one. And that's, you know what, you're playing a really good team. So I think he'll bounce back in future weeks for sure.
Early responses in the chat. Elder Grimm says, wouldn't trade a bag of Five Guys fries for him. I mean, that's like a meal, though.
Five Guys fries are nice.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It's not just like, any bag. I mean, a bag of Five Guys fries.
Especially the Cajun fries.
Very good.
Oh, yeah.
Very good.
Kidding me?
I don't know. Aldergrim, that might be a little too high.
Is there Five Guys around here?
Probably.
I gotta find one now.
I feel like there's got to be a Five Guys in the greater Cincinnati
I'm gonna find
area.
one this week. I think we'll figure it out.
We got somebody else who said Ravens are a legit spot for Forbes. They like the pre-draft. I mean, if you like Nate Wiggins, not that they're the same player. I think that Wiggins is a better player. But if you were okay drafting Nate Wiggins, lower weight profile as well, it would make sense that the Ravens would be interested in Forbes, depending on what you're getting for him.
No, I agree. I think anybody who needs any corners, because there's not enough elite corners. Not that he's an elite guy, but there's not even enough cornerback depth in the league. And I think anybody would be interested at the right price. I really do.
Yeah. All right. Keep firing off suggestions if you have one of where Emmanuel Forbes could potentially be traded as another healthy scratch here in this game. As we move on to the next game, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New Orleans Saints. This is a decade-long rivalry at this point. The Saints and the Buccaneers do not like each other, and they have made it known over the last couple of years. There are subtle shots, and there are also not so subtle shots that we have seen over the last handful of years. The Buccaneers win this one big. You don't often see a lopsided score like this in such a rivalry, but they take this one 51-27 as the road team as well. So when we look at the top 5 graded players, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, running back Sean Tucker, number 1 on this list. No Rachaad White in this game. Tucker was filling in along with Bucky Irving. 92.4 overall grade in this game. Incredible performance for him. We'll dig into that. Cornerback Tyke Smith with an 89.0. Just looked like Peanut Tillman out there, just punching the ball out any chance he possibly got. Edge rusher Yaya Diaby with an 82.2. Running back Bucky Irving with an 81.4, and then wide receiver Chris Godwin a 77.2. Baker Mayfield in this one, 325 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, but also 3 interceptions. He was very up and down. 56.6 is the overall grade that he ended up earning in this game. New Orleans Saints on their side of things. Trevor Penning, number 1 on the list. Look at that. All right.
Right tackle might be working for him.
Like to see it. 82.1, safety Jordan Howden with a 75.1, tight end Juwan Jennings with a 74.7, offensive tackle Talise Fuanga with a 72.4, and then tight end Foster Moreau with a 72.2. Spencer Rattler getting the start for an injured Derek Carr in this game. In his first start, he earned a 64.8 overall grade. I thought Spencer was fine in this game. I really did. He struggled, but we figured that would be the case. It's tough going up against Todd Bowles' defense. It's tough going up against the defense and getting Kalijah Cansey back, getting Antoine Winfield Jr. back. It doesn't help that basically the first pass you throw it to Chris Olave, he gets popped, ball comes out, Antoine Winfield Jr. picks it up. Oops, all of a sudden now you're down 14 on the scoreboard. Like that does not help any rookie quarterback out.
It's a rough situation for darn sure with that.
So I thought that he had a really tough situation, but what do you think? What was the stat that told the story in this massive win for Tampa Bay?
Trevor, I just have to ask you, are the Bucs suddenly out of nowhere just a freight train that can't be stopped on the ground?
100%.
Is that what this is? Because they had 277 rushing yards to the Saints 82. And let me give you just the second half of this game. And the Bucs went into this game behind at halftime. Was it 27-24, I think it was? 27 carries in the second half for 220 yards, 2 touchdowns, and between those two guys, a 93.9 rushing grade in the second half of this game. I mean, that's just ridiculous. When is the last time we've ever seen the Bucs run the ball like this? What, since the days?
Been a long time,
since the days of Doug Martin, or what? I mean, honestly, they all of a sudden they're
Warwick Dunn.
All of a sudden they're just a freight train. I mean, Sean Tucker and Bucky Irving just took the game completely over. The Tucker running people over, Irving slippery. We've been talking about him since the draft. They just made a statement coming out in the second half of this game, even though they were behind and their defense wasn't playing well. Credit to their defense, too, not giving up any points in the second half either. But the Bucs, out of nowhere, they just went into halftime and got pissed off and started running the ball. And it just never stopped. 220 yards in the second half alone is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I know, look, Sean Tucker, undrafted guy, Bucky Irving, a fourth-round guy. These two just, I mean, that's as dominant an effort from 2 running backs as you're almost ever going to see, especially in the second half.
Yeah, Dave Salfaro, our do-everything person here at PFF, found this stat on the fly right when the game was ending. Buccaneers' 10 rushes of 10 or more yards versus the Saints are the most that they've had in a single game in the PFF era. So since 2006, which is as far as our data goes back. Sean Tucker had 6, Bucky Irving had 2, Baker Mayfield had 1, and Sterling Shepard even got himself a rep there, getting 10 plus yards on a carry. So they were running the ball at will, which, that kind of leans into my most disappointing. I could just say that. It's the Saints' run defense, and when you look at the Saints defensive line, it's part of what made projecting success for this team in the long term difficult, because it felt like they were the in-between. Like, you're sort of about to turn the page, but you're still hanging on to some vets. And certainly the first couple of weeks of the season, they were able to play well, but now we're looking back on those first 2 weeks, and it was Panthers with Bryce Young and a struggling Cowboys team. And so as they have played better competition, it's not like they got the doors blown off of them by the Kansas City Chiefs last week. I'm not trying to say that. I'm not trying to take everything away from this team. But it feels like they're sort of at an in-between here, and I feel that way about their defensive line. They have some young guys, they have some older guys, but it just doesn't seem to be gelling right now, especially in run defense. When you look at how they have played this season, 45.6 run defense grade as a team. And then, of course, against the Buccaneers, as you would suspect, it was worse. 38.4 run defense grade, which is 31st in the NFL. The only team that was worse was the Carolina Panthers, which we'll get back to in a little bit. But that was definitely disappointing to me. Baker Mayfield was the stat that told the story for me. And it's this Jekyll and Hyde act with Baker Mayfield that he cannot seem to escape. They win the game 51-27. I understand that. I'm not trying to take anything away from the Buccaneers. 325 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. But it's the variance that can kill you against the better teams that are going to be more consistent. Very first quarter for Baker Mayfield, 80.1 passing grade. Great. We're humming along. You love to see that. The script is working. Liam Cohen's in his bag. You're scoring multiple. You got multiple scoring drives in the first quarter. It's fantastic. Second quarter, he goes from an 80.1 passing grade to a 33.2. Like, it's just falling off a cliff. His 2 turnover-worthy plays came in the second quarter. New Orleans went on a huge run, scored 27 points in the second quarter, and a lot of that was just because all momentum was on their side because Mayfield was not able to stop that slide in the second quarter. They recalibrated in the second half, and obviously the Bucs win big, but to me it's just it's always going to be a thing with Mayfield. This is kind of just who the identity is. He could give you the highest highs, but man, that drop-off is so steep. And I wish the floor was a little bit higher for this group when it comes to when they're not playing well. But it just doesn't feel like that's the case. But so to me, that's sort of the stat that told the story, even within a blowout. Most impressive. Who do you got?
Most impressive, excuse me. I was going to go, my first instinct, because every week my first instinct tells me this, is to go with Chris Godwin. And I was going to do that, and then I took a look and I remembered, no, let me get a rookie in here. Tyke Smith, just fantastic stuff from him in the slot. He's really added a punch to the secondary because last year, really good at safety, obviously, with Winfield. Really good out wide last year. Pretty good with Davis and Dean on the outside, but they were struggling a little bit in the slot. Tyke Smith's been a revelation. Look, targeted 6 times in this game, allowed 2 catches for 19 yards. Punched a ball out like Charles Tillman would, forced fumble that led to the Winfield touchdown, had an interception, had another forced incompletion, and an 89 overall grade. He's figured it out over the last few weeks. Over the last 4 weeks, I think he's a top 10 corner in all of football by our grading right now. He's just been spectacular in the slot. I mean, you talk about the exact role that they brought him in to take on from Georgia. And he played a little bit of deep safety, too, at Georgia, but the Bucs don't really need that. You got Whitehead and Winfield back there. He's just been terrific. I mean, you talk about a guy who could maybe quietly – defensive rookie of the year right now is kind of wide open, right? We don't have a lot of standouts. Kamari Lassiter's pretty good. Jared Verse has been pretty good, but maybe Tyke Smith's the guy who can work his way into that equation because he's playing fantastic football in the slot for them.
No, there is no doubt about it. He is playing fantastic. We got some people in the chat kind of wanted to talk about Spencer Rattler a little bit. We touched on him at the very top of this conversation, but again, I thought that Spencer played well. 64.7 overall grade for us, and people were like, whoa, wait a second, you've got him graded higher than Baker? Yes, because he was more consistent, where Baker had the big time up and down, and his common stats obviously look better. The overall performance, I think the floor of Spencer Rattler was a little bit higher. And it's tough. Like I said, you go down immediately 14-0. You lose Chris Olave immediately. You basically have to abandon the run in the second half because Tampa is getting up so many points. So it was a really tough script for him to follow, not to mention the interior offensive line being ravaged, and so you're getting a lot of pressure there as well up the middle. So I think given the circumstances, Rattler played fine. There were some things that he did well. he had one big-time throw. He had the 2 turnover-worthy plays. His adjusted completion percentage was above 70%. He took 5 sacks, but again, it's a really beat-up offensive line. And he had 3 drops in this game. And again, you're playing without Chris Olave, so it's tough. It was really tough in that regard. So given the circumstance, I thought that he was fine. Any Rattler takes before I get to my most impressive?
No, it's just a tough assignment. It's hard enough in your first NFL start when you're going against Todd Bowles, because we know how he is against young and rookie quarterbacks. But to fall behind 14-0, you can't sit here and say that Rattler was the reason they lost this game. They gave up 50,
Yes.
They gave up 51 points.
Right. I agree with you. My most impressive, it has to be Sean Tucker, man. With no Rashad White in this game.
Our guy Max Chadwick's loving you right now.
He should, and you know what? It's well deserved here for Sean Tucker and Max loving Sean Tucker as well, especially when he was coming through the draft. What was that? Was that he was the Bijan year, right? Because I think I had Bijan Robinson as like RB1 at one point, and then I had Sean Tucker as RB2 because of a fantastic sophomore season that he had. And he just didn't look like the same guy as junior year, so I didn't really know what to think. But the speed, power, build, ability to play off of contact, like all that was pretty dang good for him. And we saw 136 rushing yards on 14 carries yesterday, but also 3 catches on 3 targets, 56 yards and a receiving touchdown. So he got into the end zone twice, had those 6 explosive runs that I mentioned. He was fantastic, man. He was a big reason why the Bucs were able to have a big day because of how just explosive that he was. Everybody thought that it was just going to be Bucky Irving and that was going to be it, but they were truly able to lean on the run game in a big way, especially in the fourth quarter when they were sort of like supposed to be salting away the game. They kept moving the chains. They kept scoring because their run game was so successful yesterday. So credit to those guys, and even the offensive line up front just being able to punch a Saints straight in the mouth, and I thought that was big for him.
Absolutely. I mean, you talk about I remember watching Tucker back at Syracuse, and I think I got to grade at least a couple of games of his doing the Cuse games back when I was doing that. He just looked like an NFL running back. It was it was a little weird to me that he went undrafted. I actually thought he would get drafted by somebody, but he's big and he's fast. I mean, there's no question about that. Back then he had to work on the vision a little bit, but he's always had the tools to succeed like this. And if he's going to be that big compliment to Irving, and even when Rashad White gets back, I think Tucker has a role because he's just built differently than those guys.
We've got an ongoing question in the chat right now. If you're just tuning into the show, Emmanuel Forbes, healthy scratch for the Washington Commanders this past week. Probably a trade candidate. We're going to talk about some trade deadline guys over, I think, in the next couple of weeks. So an easy way to give you a question here is, where could he be traded? Who's somebody who needs a cornerback? A couple of people are saying the Houston Texans honestly could be a spot for him. I know they got Laster. They've got Derek Stingley Jr., but wouldn't be a bad flyer to take if you get to just throw a day 3 pick at him and be like, hey, let's get this guy on the team and see what happens. So
I kind of like that as a system fit too.
Yeah,
it might be a better defense for him.
I don't hate it with the Houston Texans. NGA saying trade him to Carolina, Forbes, and a 3rd or a 4th rounder for J.C. Horn. Oh,
I don't hate that. I almost wonder about if Washington needs one more receiver too. Could he be a piece in a Amari Cooper trade, something like that?
What are you saying? Like
Forbes, like if you did Forbes and a 5th for Amari Cooper.
Oh, well, I don't know if the Browns would do that specifically, but that's very interesting. Potentially getting a receiver back.
Or some other receiver as just a piece to get something that could help them in a playoff run.
I see what you're saying. Ooh, Vikings a suggestion. They need some depth at corner.
It's a thought.
Chargers.
Any team who needs a corner. Anybody.
It's very interesting. I want to hear from people throughout the chat as we go through this entire show. But before we get to our next game, talk to you about our friends over at DraftKings. Best part about football season is always checking the post-game stats, right? Which wideout scored more than 2 touchdowns, quarterbacks threw for more or less than 350 yards, all that good stuff. If you think that you can pick what's going to happen before kickoff, you got to play Pick 6 by DraftKings, an official daily fantasy partner of the NFL. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now. All you do is select between 2 to 6 players, okay? Bunch 2 to 6 players together. Choose whether they will have more or less of a certain stat. There you go. It's that simple. For the first time, Pick 6 players, you can check this out. New customers, they play just $5 on their first Pick 6 set. They get 50 in Pick 6 credits for free. Maybe you don't love how the Washington Commanders are playing in the secondary right now. Maybe you look at their matchup next week and you say, I think this team's going to eat. I think they're going after it. Okay, well, you can bundle a couple of players together and you can check out what their stats are. All right, well, it's going to be more than this, more than this, more than this. Think they're all going to go over? There you go. You can play $5 on it. and you get 50 back for free. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now. Use the promo code PFF. That's promo code PFF for new customers to play $5 on your first Pick 6 set and get 50 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. If you got a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problems with gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. You must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. One per new customer. Non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits expire within 6 months. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. All right, Cardinals, Packers. Packers put it on them. Hand up. Thought the Cardinals would be better in this one. Really did. I thought this would be a pretty even match.
Better than this.
I think all things considered, I liked taking the Cardinals in the points, and to be honest, I did. And they just didn't play well, and Green Bay really took it to them. So let's look at the Packers. Got to look at their top 5 first because they won the game. Safety Evan Williams. I mean, he is part of one of a bunch of slot/safety defenders in this class. They're studs. We just talked about Tyke Smith, Andrew Phillips from the Giants, another one, Evan Williams here. I mean, we got good safety play, and it was Kalen Bullock's another one right off the top of my head, right? These guys that we were told it was a down safety class, the slot. I like some of the slot versatility players, but I didn't know they'd be getting on the field playing like this early. Evan Williams, 93.3 overall grade in this one. Edge rusher Carl Brooks with a 93.0. Offensive tackle Zach Tom with an 88.1. Tight end Ben Sims with an 83.8. And edge rusher Rashawn Gary having a bounce-back game, 81.7. I believe that is a season high there for him. Jordan Love, a 72.1 overall grade in this one. And then for Arizona's side of things, defensive tackle Kyrie's Tonga with an 83.1 to top the list. Linebacker Julian Okwara with a 77.9. Tight end Trey McBride, 77.6. Cornerback Sterling Thomas with a 75.7. And then Naquan Jones, their defensive tackle, in at number 5 with a 74.9. Kyler Murray, a 59.2 in this game. Stat that told the story, Dalton. What do you got?
So the weird part about this game, and I think it's kind of weird, because the Packers 2 weeks ago had a game like this on the losing side against Minnesota, right, where they fell behind real early and they tried to scratch their way back, and it didn't quite work. The Cardinals came into this week with the highest graded first quarter offense in the league. They were the best team in the first quarter. They were getting off to good starts. They were high flying. They were running the ball. They had Kyler. They had Marvin Harrison. They had Michael Wilson working. Trey McBride. Everything was working. This game, their first 18 plays across 4 drives, they gained 34 yards and 1 first down. Just didn't. You kind of said it right at the top. They just kind of didn't have it. They had 1 drive all day that had 4 minutes of time of possession. They didn't get their first play that gained 10 yards until there was 3 minutes left in the second quarter. They couldn't get chunk plays. They couldn't get first downs. It was just this entire first quarter. Meanwhile, I believe the Packers scored on their first 4 drives. I mean, it's the exact same thing that the Vikings did to the Packers 2 weeks ago in Lambeau.
Right.
And they must have just watched that, and the Packers said, well, let's do that to somebody. And that's exactly what happened. Honestly, it's like it's a good strategy to go ahead, 24-0 that early. But
it's good work if you can get it.
Honestly, we know the Cardinals are better than this on offense, right? We know. We saw it for 5 weeks.
In theory.
In theory, yeah. But offensively, they don't usually have this type of trouble, especially in the beginning of games when they've been coming out hot, right?
Right.
It's just a rough day at the office. I mean, I think every team has 1 or 2 games a year like this where it just, for some reason, doesn't happen, and this was the Cardinals' turn. I mean, it just didn't. We know Kyler's better than this. Really sucks that Marvin Harrison Jr. got the concussion.
Mm-hmm.
It just didn't click. Just the engine never got running. They tried to get James Conner going early, didn't happen. Tried to get Kyler going, didn't happen. The Packers sent some heat on him early. Just nothing. You just have one of those Sundays sometimes that it just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, and I feel like there have been. Not that I want to be too harsh on a team. We're still in the first half of the season here. It's offensive coordinator Drew Petzing. He's new as the play caller there, so I don't want to be too harsh on it. But it feels like there has been more of those, even in just spurts for the Cardinals, than I thought there were going to be. It feels like we've had the really high highs. What was the game that they absolutely demolished? I can't remember who the opponent was.
The Rams.
Rams, where I mean, Kyler had like a 96.5 PFF grade. I mean, he was just untouchable.
And he himself can run kind of hot and cold too.
That's right.
They're better. They look better as an offense when they have balance. And that was the one thing that was clear is they've been using all these tight ends and 12 and 13 personnel all year. They could not get James Conner going in the first quarter at all, and then the rest of the offense just went in kind of a chain reaction after that, just didn't get started.
Yeah, I also look at, obviously the Cardinals' offense was disappointing in this game. You know, as a long-term fix, because kind of like you said, they've got the pieces on offense. Like, they have the ability to play well every single week, so it was kind of just like, hey, it was not their day when it came to the offensive side of things. I'm more worried about the defensive side of things long-term, specifically up front, because their lack of backfield success, I think, was truly a stat that told a story in this one. They had 14 blitzes in this game, and yet on those blitzes, just a 7.1 pass rush win percentage and 0 sacks. I mean, if you're blitzing, it's got to be a lot more successful than that. You got to be able to get home, and you got to be able to win as a team a lot better than 7.1%. That number's got to be 30s, 40s, something like that. I mean, we're not even close here. So if you look at their overall pass rush reps, 36 pass rush reps, 15 total pressures. All right, not bad. 0 sacks. I mean, you got to be able to convert those pressures. You've got to be able to get there. Now, obviously, we're an outlet, and I would agree with this. Pressures are more important. They are more regular. You can depend on them, and they still disrupt the offense without having to get the player on the ground with a sack. There's no doubt about it. If you get the player on the ground, the play is over, right? And so if you get a pressure, obviously you're still allowing quarterbacks to make plays, especially the good ones like we have seen Jordan Love be a lot over the last year and a half. 16 pass rush reps where the ball was thrown after 2.5 seconds, Dalton. 0 sacks. You've got to be able to get after quarterback better, and you got to be able to finish plays in the backfield better than what the Arizona Cardinals certainly did against the Green Bay Packers. Anytime you're giving Jordan Love that kind of an opportunity, he's going to make you pay because that's the kind of quarterback he is. Most impressive for you in this game.
Real quick on that point, too, I think what needs to be noted sometimes is especially the pass rush win rate I thought was the best stat in that graphic there. And I think what the amount of pressure can be a thing, right? Just how often do we get there? But I think it needs to be said that the quality of the pressure matters too, right? That's how guys earn those higher pass rush grades, by winning quicker, right? So if you have quarterbacks with a long time to throws, and Jordan Love sometimes holds the ball and waits on it, right? He wants to throw vertically. If you're not getting there quickly, you can get all your pressure, but if all your pressures are coming at 3.2 seconds, that's still taking too long. So it's a thing of like, okay, your pressure percentage might be high, but why are the grades so low? Because you're not actually getting there as fast as you should. Now you're getting there. We talk about sometimes, the pass rush wins before or when, a quarterback gets rid of the ball too quickly, but we still give you the win. Kind of works the other way around a little bit where it's like, okay, you got pressure, but it took you 3.5 seconds. You're just kind of at the behest now of, is the quarterback going to hold the ball longer than he should? So I think you're right. The quality of the pressures and the low pass rush win rate is a big thing right now for the Cardinals. Most impressive, I'm going in the trenches on the other side. Look, Zach Tom is one of the best offensive linemen in football. The only right tackle right now graded higher than him is Penei Sewell. He's the second best right tackle in football. I think he's the quietest elite offensive lineman we have in the game. 88.1 overall grade. That's his third game this year with a grade at least that high. And an 87.9 run blocking grade. He is spectacular, especially in Matt LaFleur's zone schemes and that. 7 positively graded run blocks in this game. I mean, he's just mauling people. He is one of, I know they had talked about before the season, do we move him to center? Some people think he'd be a Hall of Fame center. I wouldn't move him an inch. Absolutely.
Well, clearly not now.
Absolutely not. He's already got 3 games out of 6 with an overall grade at 88 or higher. That's insane. He's the second best right tackle in football right now, and he's there. So far, you could argue he's been their most consistent offensive player between him and Jaden Reed through the first 6 games. Zach Tom,
Jaden Reed's been awesome.
I think it needs to start to be said. Look, here's the other thing: pass protection too, not just run blocking. 38 pass blocking reps. He lost 1 of them all day. No official pressures, 1 pass rush loss. I mean, he is straight up one of the best offensive linemen in football. Zach Tom's name needs to get into the Pro Bowl, All-Pro, PFF, all whatever list, because he's straight up. He's just a spectacular football player.
You work at PFF. You can make that happen.
I don't make the list. Unless they're
could.
I could. Maybe I got to ask to make the list.
Yeah.
I got to talk to some people.
Commandeer the list. Take it over.
Second team
by force.
Second team right tackle right now would be Zach Tom, no question.
I love the claim. I love the shout out. I really do. I'm going to stick with the Packers for my most impressive. Evan Williams, their safety. We saw him number 1 on that list of the highest graded player that we had here. 4th round pick out of Oregon over the last 3 weeks specifically. He has the highest coverage grade of any safety in the NFL at a 91.6. He had a forced fumble in this one, 2 forced incompletions, an interception. He had the interception in week 2, I should say. And so, he's just been all over the field for them. It's been a welcome initiative. We're all talking about Xavier McKinney, and this is a little bit of a joke, but my most disappointing is Xavier McKinney because he didn't get an interception in this one. Right?
Another safety took his spotlight. That's wrong. It feels wrong.
I didn't even think about that. You're right.
Good weekend. You mentioned Oregon Ducks. Good weekend for the Oregon Ducks. Too.
Is Evan Williams a team player? He could have had Xavier McKinney. Could have tied would that have tied the record? No, because the record is, I think it's 8 interceptions in a row.
That's ridiculous.
He was a player. I cannot remember his name. Maybe Walt's still in the chat because I think it was, when I looked it up, it was somebody on the Raiders in the 60s. Had, over the span of 2 seasons, it was like one going into the other, had 8 in a row, where he had 8 interceptions consecutively. And then the most single game ones, I think it is 6. But Trayvon Diggs technically had 7 because he had 2 interceptions in one of those games, but it was like 6 in a row. So Xavier McKinney could have tied it right there. Anyways, I just went off a rant. That was so I jokingly had Xavier McKinney as my most disappointing, just because we kind of already touched about what's disappointing with the Cardinals. So I was going to have a little bit of fun there. But man, Evan Williams, one of the highest graded rookies that we have all season long. So the Packers are playing extremely well. I'm going to shout out the people in the chat who are talking about the NFC North. Dude, the Packers are 4-2 and they're last in the NFC North. This is an unbelievable division, and if there was ever a year where 4 teams from a division make the playoffs.
Have you seen the other stat on this? What, these 4 teams are the top 4 teams in point differential right now.
Nuts.
That's just
nuts.
It makes no sense.
Get all 4 of them in the playoffs.
Yeah. Well, and the weird part, actually, and I'll say this for the scheduling, I know it's like this for the Bears. I'm not sure about the rest of them. All of these NFC North division games are all like week 12 or later. They just backloaded all of them for some reason. Like the Bears, it's like 6 of their last 7 games are their division games or something like that. It's just weird but they're going outside the division and they're all dominating, and now we're going to see, who knows what we're going to see. Is it going to be 4 teams with double-digit wins? That's insane. I don't even know.
That would be crazy.
I don't even know if mathematically that can happen.
I don't know either.
That's just nuts.
Most disappointing for you?
I kind of honestly, both teams for me didn't get any pass rush in this game.
Okay,
I know that
right.
the Cardinals, obviously, the Packers not much either. Only pressured Kyler Murray 8 out of 28 dropbacks, no sacks, 1 hit on him. Rashawn Gary was the only player in the entire game with a 15% pass rush win rate. So not a great day for either defensive line necessarily in the pass rush, but the Packers are feeling better about it with a 3-touchdown win for sure.
I just looked this up to check, and you are correct. All 4 of these teams are the highest 4-point differential in the NFL.
They're going to change the playoff structure if this keeps. No, I'm kidding. But I mean, that's just. I think actually on some tiebreaker, one of them is out of the playoffs for the moment. So it's the NFC North against the world. It's crazy. All of a sudden, it's the best division in football.
Wild. Love to see it. Colts Titans. The Colts ended up winning this game, 2017. It's close. Divisional matchup. AFC South. Kind of feels like it always is. The legend of Joe Flacco, the legend of Will Levis. Never know what you're going to get with either of these guys at this point in their career. But the Colts won, so we'll give them the honors of seeing their top 5 highest graded players. First, tight end Andrew Ogletree was at the top of the list. Now, again, we normally make the cutoff 25 snaps. I think Ogletree had like 21, but he had such a great game. I wanted to shout out Ogletree here. 88.5. Now, number 2 on the list, cornerback Sam Womack with an 88.0. Offensive tackle Bernard Ryman with a 87.4. Offensive tackle Quentin Nelson with an 81.7. And then Grover Stewart with an 81.0. Joe Flacco in this game, 56.1. Flipping over to the other side for the Tennessee Titans, their rookie cornerback, Jarvis Brownlee Jr., he played a heck of a game, 85.0. As the number 1 graded player here on the team, running back Tony Pollard with a 77.9. Defensive tackle Jeffrey Simmons with 73.7, safety Quandre Diggs with a 72.1, and then offensive guard Peter Skoronski 68.1. Will Levis in this game close to Joe Flacco 54.1. I looked it up. They were the 23rd and 24th highest graded quarterbacks that we had in the league for this week, which goes to show you how even this matchup was. Divisional foes, very similar quarterback play. I'll just start with the stat that told the story because that kind of goes right into it for me. It's Joe Flacco's experience. And I'm joking a little bit here that the stat that tells the story is the fact that Joe Flacco has started 187 games in his NFL career. But I'm also not joking because that little margin there, that little bit of experience actually probably was the difference here in this one. I mentioned how close these guys were in PFF passing grade this week. At the end of the day, their numbers were pretty dang similar. Flacco had one big-time throw in the fourth quarter. Levis had 0 throughout the whole game. That was about it. It was basically that last drive to sort of salt away the game. Joe Flacco rolling to his right, dime of a throw in tight coverage. You move the sticks, you keep things going, you win the game. So a lot of times you get NFL teams that are just very evenly matched, and it only comes down to a couple of plays. Joe Flacco made them, and one specifically, more than Will Levis did here in this game, and that's why it's a 3-point victory for them. So to me, that was that stat that told the story. The one big-time throw in the experience from Flacco when they needed it, specifically in the fourth quarter in a drive where if you have a sustained drive, you win the football game, and the Colts did that. So that was the stat that told the story for me. What about for you?
You're right. Look, Flacco's experience and just knowing how to win in those situations in a low-scoring game made the difference. And the other side of that is Will Levis. Look, there's two things Will Levis wants to do. He wants to throw the football downfield, or he wants to take off and run. And he wasn't able to do either of those things. He only had 102 yards the entire day. 1 touchdown, 1 interception, a 52.8 passing grade, 4 for 13 on 10-plus yard targets. That's not where Will Levis is going to live. He's not a check down guy. He's not a quick game guy. He wants to throw it vertically or he wants to run. He only had 3 carries for 15 yards. And I think it just, when you talked before about high variance guys, right? Like Baker Mayfield before, right? Mm-hmm. Will Levis is the ultimate high variance guy. It's a home run or it's a strikeout, right? You've got now, they had a 17-10 lead. Really good drive coming out of halftime, the second half. 17-10 lead. Their next 5 drives, they went 15 plays, 39 yards total. So they had a 7-point lead. Colts tie it up. Colts kick a field goal. Then the Colts tie it up. It's not consistent enough, right? You get a good first half when they were running the ball and getting things done. You had a good first drive coming out in the third quarter. But then you get 4, 5, 6 drives in a row with Tennessee where they just get nothing done. And Levis not being able to complete passes downfield, it takes it away because you see he's just not as accurate. The footwork isn't as good. The short game doesn't go. Their best player in this game was Tony Pollard, right? But Levis just didn't do enough to support that. This is the second or third time we've seen this year that Tennessee has run the ball well and their defense has been good enough to win, and they just don't get enough in the passing game because it's too high variance, and you cannot live like that. There's several teams that are trying to live like this. I've talked about it with probably a half dozen teams this year. Tennessee's one of them, and as long as Levis is their quarterback, it's going to be that way.
Most impressive for me in this game was Josh Downs, who continues to be a go-to player for them. Once again, led the team in targets with 9, led the team in targets with 7 catches, 66 receiving yards, and a touchdown here in this game. And the reason why he is the most impressive, again, here on this list, specifically in this game, is going into this one, the Tennessee Titans had allowed the fewest receiving yards to slot receivers. And yet, the Colts were like, this is still our guy. We're still running our offense through Josh Downs. And I think that he is just absolutely shining here on this team. So we don't exactly know the health situation of Michael Pittman Jr. He's out there in this game, but it was like, okay, well, he was going to go on IR.
Game-winning touchdown.
Now he's going to go, obviously, yeah, right, game-winning touchdown. So he's out there, clearly, but they're comfortable giving Josh Downs the lion's share of the looks when it comes to their passing game. And we've seen that over the last 3 weeks specifically. This was another one that goes into that case. So Josh Downs continues to be a really impressive player and was the most impressive player here in this one for me. What about you? Who's most impressive?
It's 3 constants in Indianapolis, Trevor. 3. Death, Texas, and the Colts offensive line being really good. It's that simple. Look, they've got some injuries now they're dealing with. Ryan Kelly came out of this game, and Tanner Bortolini, the rookie, came in at center late in the game to finish a job. They lost Will Fries last week. Dalton Tucker comes in that spot. But I got to be honest with you, week in and week out, this is, through 6 weeks, the best offensive line that I've watched, the most consistent offensive line in football. And them, they didn't have a ton of rushing yards in this game. Flacco was under some pressure. The pass pro was better. 7 pressures allowed, no sacks or hits. Flacco was moving around when he had to. 86.5 overall grade this season for this offensive line. That's the best in football by several points. I think like 5 points. I mean, they are just week in and week out giving this team a chance to win when they didn't have Anthony Richardson again in this game. Michael Pittman's at whatever he is, 70 or 80%. They didn't have Jonathan Taylor in this game either. They're out there with Tyler Goodson and Trey Sermon just trying to figure things out. But you throw on this tape, and it's just constantly stable on offense because of these 5 guys up front. And again, I want to give big credit to Tanner Bortolini because he started the last 2 games at center in place of Ryan Kelly. Kelly comes back for this game, gets hurt mid-game, and Bortolini comes back in for the winning drives at the end. They have talent. They have depth. You saw Ryman and Nelson in the top 5 there because I'm pretty sure they're in the top 5 there every single week. Bernard Ryman, he's another one. He's one of the most underrated tackles in football. This offensive line keeps this offense so stable that it constantly gives them a chance to win. And you talk about, oh man, they're starting Joe Flacco again this week. He can't move. Doesn't matter. He's got the biggest pocket in football to work with right now. And I think that's just a big reason they can keep grinding away. They can win games 20-17, and they can keep winning games without their starting quarterback and without their star running back.
Colts, I know a lot of people aren't super impressed with the ceiling of the Colts, but...
And their defense, this was probably the best game their defense played all year between this and the Pittsburgh game.
Yeah.
It's not a great defense.
Look, most disappointing is Calvin Ridley because he had 8 targets and no catches in this game.
Against this team. Yeah.
Right. And so, I'm wondering, is it just a Levis thing? Are we watching just some inconsistencies of the offense with Levis at the helm because he's kind of working through it? Or are the Colts really shutting him down? And I don't know. Maybe I'll give kudos. Sam Womack, we saw him up there. Jalen Johnson's been up there in the top 5 in recent weeks as well when we kind of gone through their grades. And so I think it's a defense that just plays a lot better than people give it credit for. And I'm pretty comfortable saying that no matter how it looks every single week. It might not be an elite defense. We might need to still figure some things out. But I do feel as though they're playing better than people expected, myself included, going into the season. Again, my most disappointing, Calvin Ridley. I mentioned 8 targets, 0 catches. Didn't get a target till the third quarter.
But this is the thing. It's hard to work those outside guys into the game plan if all we do is chuck it downfield, too. There's no rhythm. You feel me? There was definitely a rhythm in this game in the run game. Tony Pollard got it going, for sure.
Yes.
He was their best offensive player. But if you have no rhythm, you know how they talk about sometimes, get him an easy one, get him a screen just to get him involved, right? If it's constant go balls and just chucking it, there is no rhythm. And clearly, they're high variance throws with an already high variance quarterback. It's not going to work like that. So it's not. I don't think it's going to be all on Calvin here, but I think it's just kind of the lesson in you have to get all of your best players involved, right? You can't play a game against the Colts and their defense and have Calvin Ridley go without a catch for the entire game.
I'm with you. That's why the whole thing is disappointing to me. Whether it's a Calvin Ridley thing, it's not going to be all him. However big of a piece of the puzzle that he is for not getting a single catch in this game, that's an offensive failure, no doubt about it. Especially when you come up 3 points short and your wide receiver one. I don't know. People might say no, they got DeAndre Hopkins. He's a wide receiver. Whatever. One of your top wide receivers, the guy that has to be eating for you every single week, gets 8 targets and 0 catches. That just can't be the case. Most disappointing for you.
It's really just, I think you mentioned it, the Titans' entire offensive operation right now. It's just not giving them a chance to win. They're second to last in yards per game. They're third to last in offensive grade, and they're dead last in passing grade. So, again, if they're going to keep running Will Levis out there as a trial, he's young, maybe he figures something out. But if you're dead last in the league in passing grade, we see how this goes every year with teams like that, right? And they are not consistently functional enough on offense to give themselves a chance to win games. I mean, they'll probably certainly argue we should have won this game. We had a lead relatively late, and we just offensively, their defense was good enough to win this game. And the Colts were just patient enough to get 4 or 5 yards at a time, get a first down to Josh Downs here, get a Michael Pittman jump ball there. But again, I think it goes back to the last 5 drives after they had a lead, a 17-10 lead, and they had 39 yards in 5 drives.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it's just as much when you blow a lead a lot of times. It can be just as much your defense blowing a lead as it is your offense just not sustaining drives. If you keep giving the other team chances, you mentioned Flacco and his experience. If If you give Joe Flacco a chance to beat you, he can still beat you.
Right.
Even at his age. And he knew that. Like, all we need to do, just keep getting 5 yards. If we got to punt it, we'll play field. They're not moving the ball. And it just might take some time, but, sometimes the turtle beats the hare, right? And I think that's what happened here. And the Titans, offensively, every week, it's kind of just this, where it's like great moments, but there's not enough of them. They're too high.
Oh, I thought you were about to give us our born from great opportunity. I thought you were.
Is that like another Spider-Man thing, or what is that?
Oh, my God.
What does that come from? I'm like clueless. I live in a cave.
Great moments were born from great opportunity. Her books, Miracle. That's tough, Dalton, even for you. We got 2 more games in the 1 o'clock Monday slate. I just, one of them we're going to talk about here in a second is Browns-Eagles, but we're also going to touch on Drake May and how he did in his debut coming up next. But we do want to start with the Browns and the Eagles. Eagles win this game 20-16. They were able to get a massive conversion with A.J. Brown to kind of round this one out in this game. It was closer than I thought it was going to be. I'm not going to lie. But let's take a look at the Eagles' top 5 graded players before we get into the stats that really told the story of this one. A.J. Brown is at the very top of the list for the Philadelphia Eagles with a 91.3 overall grade. We got a pair of defensive tackles, Jordan Davis, 83.6, and then Jalen Carter, 81.5. Linebacker Nolan Smith, 3 straight Georgia players. Boom. Look at that. 77.8. And then number 5, offensive tackle Jordan Mailata with a 75.8. Jalen Hurts in this one, a 73.0. On Cleveland side of things, surprise, Myles Garrett at the very top of the list with an 86.4. Tight end David Njoku with a 79.0. Safety Rodney McLeod with a 77.8. Linebacker Muhammad Diabate with a 77.7. And then linebacker Devin Bush with a 75.9. Quarterback Deshaun Watson in this one continues to struggle this season, 51.5. Dalton, stats that told the story. What do we got?
So the Eagles' offense just doesn't look totally right, does it? Like, I just think it feels
Depends
like
which plays you look at.
It feels, and that's my point. It's my exact point right there. Is it feels like the drives where they get some big explosive play, they go down and score. And then there's other drives. It kind of feels like all or nothing right now, doesn't it? Right? And I've got here's what I have. They ran for 116 yards on the day, right? 3 of them accounted for 42 of those yards. That means their other 33 carries, they had 74 yards. It's a grind right now, okay? The passing game, 7 explosive pass plays, which is cool. That's great, especially against what's supposed to be a pretty good defense in the Browns.
7 explosive pass plays. It's cool.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty cool.
That accounts for close to 80% of their passing yardage. It just feels like right now it's a bunch of 1 yards, 3 yards, 2 yards, kind of just inching by until they can just pop one of those explosives because the defense made a mistake or A.J. Brown just makes a great play, right? Like there's not a consistent flow to this offense right now. And these look, especially the 7 explosive passes, yeah, it's the reason they won the game. I won't lie. Like, it's cool to get 7 explosives, but there's the periods in between are really rough right now. I mean, I'm talking, it really feels like it's just 2 yards at a time, 3 yards at a time, until they just can, okay, A.J. Brown, here's a go ball. Or the winning touchdown to Devontae Smith, till somebody just busts a coverage and he can walk from 50 yards in, right? I mean, it's just kind of, it's choppy. It feels like, it doesn't feel like, yeah, it feels like, okay, some people would look at it in the optimist sense and go, yeah, the Eagles are very explosive. Because they are, with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith healthy, and usually with Saquon Barkley being better than he was in this game, they are explosive. But it feels inconsistent. It feels like they could have scored more points than this. It's just the in-between plays right now in kind of the normal settings that I don't really think they're getting it done consistently. You know what I didn't know till this morning either? Do you know they have not scored a point in the first quarter this year?
The Eagles?
In 5
haven't
games,
scored a point?
5 first quarters, they have not scored a single point.
Wow.
I mean, it's hard to live. I mean, this is the Browns, so you knew it's like, and the Browns, they just couldn't score. The only touchdown was on a blocked field goal. Eventually, the dam's going to break open, and they're going to make a mistake, and Devontae Smith will be wide open for some reason, and he'll walk into the end zone.
It did kind of feel that way against the Saints, though, too. Remember that game where it was like,
eventually,
at the end of the game, clock hit 0, and the Eagles were up on top of the scoreboard, and we were like, oh.
Outside of in that game, outside of 2 or 3 explosive plays, a couple from Goddard, the one big run from Barkley, wasn't a whole lot going on.
Right.
And it was kind of the same feeling. If the Browns were capable of scoring, I think we might have seen them win this game because the Eagles, it feels like their offense right now when you watch it in sequence is we're just waiting for a home run. You're just waiting for it. It's the guy that hits 190 and hits 40 home runs a year. It's Adam Dunn or something like that, Cincinnati legend. It's something like that where it's like you're just waiting for it.
Yeah.
And you really the problem is sometimes those guys you're waiting like 3, 4, 5 days for it. Mm-hmm. If they're going cold, if you're going long stretches of these games where every play is going for 2 yards, like I know there's a lot of frustration in Philly right now, but I kind of get it. Because it's not consistent at all. You got 2 A.J. Brown go balls that were great. Devontae had the busted coverage he took for a touchdown. Grant Calcaterra had 1 busted coverage that he took for 40 yards. Like waiting for other teams' mistakes to make big plays, kind of a dangerous way to live if you're not doing the things that you need to do on the rest of the plays, of the other 80 to 90% of plays.
Walt in the chat is saying that the Eagles should give 6'8" Harold Carmichael more targets, who played in the 70s, I think. He played with the 70s with the Eagles, which is funny because I know that Walt is kind of trying to flex the history knowledge that he had there. But they do actually have Johnny Wilson on the roster.
It's close enough.
So it's close enough. So, Walt, you might have lucked into being right there.
Maybe a tall person will help.
Look, my stat that told the story, we've talked a lot about the Browns and specifically Deshaun Watson, I think, through the first 5, now 6 weeks of the season. And I think it's a little bit of a, like, there's not a lot new here with Deshaun Watson. He's bad. Like, it's no matter how many times we say it, no matter how many times we, like, cite the stats, the sacks taken, the EPA when he's out there with the offense, the lack of creativity that they have on third down, the lack of ability to move the sticks on third down, how much he is holding the ball and they expect from him and he's not giving them a return. Like, whatever you want to look at, we talked about it over the last 5 to 6 weeks. Deshaun Watson has not been good. The actual stat that tells the story here for me is that this team's not supposed to have to ask Deshaun Watson to be Superman. They're supposed to have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. They have over the last 5 years, but because of age and a little bit of changes, but more importantly, injuries this year, Dalton, I don't know if you realize this, this unit's not just, okay, the Browns' offensive line, they're not what they used to be. They're bad. They're really bad. In fact, the only offensive line in the NFL that has a worse overall blocking grade through 6 weeks is the Patriots, which we talk about being a quarterback wasteland. And we'll get to Drake May in a second because we're talking about that game next. But the Browns are next. They're 31st in the NFL, 53.4 blocking grade. They're tied for the most sacks allowed on third down with 12, and tied for the most sacks allowed on third down when credited just to the offensive line. So you take quarterback, sacks out of the equation. They're worst in the league in both of those categories. Again, the only team that they're tied with are the Patriots. The Browns are just as bad. Injuries to Jack Conklin, injuries to Ethan Posick, injuries to Wyatt Teller. Jedrick Wills coming back and not being as good as he has looked at the early parts of his career. Like, all of this goes into the fact that not only is Deshaun not great, they're asking him to be good behind a terrible offensive line right now. So, yeah, I mean, we could sit here and talk about how I think they should go to Jameis. Like, because Jameis is clearly, I think, would give them a spark that Deshaun's not giving them. But really, the root of a lot of this stuff is the offensive line.
I don't think it matters what quarterback's in there.
It doesn't. And I think part of me feels as though the Browns they're not benching Deshaun because they owe him like $200 million still. Like, we know why they're not benching Deshaun Watson. But part of me feels as though the decision makers who would even suggest that are waiting for Nick Chubb to come back and somehow look. I mean, if he looks like the Nick Chubb that we have seen after that knee injury we saw last year, it's just a mind-blowingly incredible accomplishment from Nick Chubb, if that is even close to being possible. So they're waiting for Nick Chubb to come back, I think. And then I think they're waiting for Jack Conklin and Wyatt Teller to come back, because somehow they think that when all three of those guys get back there, the offense is just going to be fixed. And Deshaun will be fine, and they'll be good to go, and he could be the starter. But I just had to go on a little bit of a rant there, because we love to talk about how bad Deshaun Watson is, and he has not been good. But this Browns offensive line is not just not what they used to be. They're terrible this season. So I don't know how much is getting better no matter what.
It's an older roster, and when you throw injuries in there, you start to look at this more of a long-term, team-wide problem. Yeah, I don't know. Look, Nick Chubb, if he comes back and he's great, fantastic. It'll certainly help. I don't think it matters what quarterback's in there. I think if it was Joe Flacco, if it was Jameis Winston, if it's Watson, I think it's pretty clear that the Browns they can't function on offense.
Nope.
And it's not giving them a chance to win. And their defense, honestly, it's not playing like an elite defense. It's still good. Obviously, anytime you have Myles Garrett, you have a chance. Block the field goal in this game that got returned for a touchdown. But offensively, they give themselves no shot to win it all. Their offense had 6 points in this game. So it's just kind of the way it's been. And it is more than just the quarterback, even though the quarterback is still arguably the biggest problem. Most impressive for me, just on the other side of that, Eagles' defensive line did dominate the way they should. 6 of their 7 highest graded defensive players were up front. Jalen Carter, Josh Sweat, Nolan Smith, Milton Williams, Jordan Davis, you name it. Pretty much every Eagles defensive lineman had a good game in this one. They totaled 18 pressures as a unit, 4 sacks. Watson was under pressure on half his dropbacks, like you just mentioned, the offensive line issues, and their defensive line, a 73% pass rush win rate. Just dominant across the board, and for that exact reason.
My most impressive was A.J. Brown. We already kind of talked about him, what he meant to this team. 9 targets, 6 catches, 116 yards. Had that big touchdown, and then sort of that vintage, like, hey, we need somebody to go make a play for us. Throw it to A.J. Brown. He does that box-out catch better than it feels like anybody in the NFL. So he was my most impressive. Most disappointing for me was the Eagles' run game. It goes a little bit into what you were talking about with the inconsistencies of the offensive side of things. Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, both below 2.7 yards per carry in this game. That, to me, should be the Eagles' identity. Like, if you want to play, shot put game in the passing game, fine, but like you got to be running the ball a lot better than what they certainly did in this game. So I don't want to take anything away from Cleveland, probably limiting them from being able to do that, but that was the disappointing part. Most disappointing for you before we move on.
The other side of Brown there, the Browns run a ton of man coverage, and you need your corners to hold up, and they didn't hold up in this game. Denzel Ward, a 46 coverage grade. Martin Emerson, a 59.8. Greg Newsome, a 27.1. They combined to give up 11 catches for 191 yards.
Sean's asking who the bottom 5 graded offensive lines are 6 weeks through the season. The Raiders are 28 at 62.2. The Titans are 29 at 61.8. The Rams are 30th at 57.1. The Browns, they're at 31 at a 53.4. And then the New England Patriots are last in the NFL at a 51.6.
If I was going to guess 5, that's about right there. That's it.
PFF knows ball. I don't know what to tell you.
We try.
I don't know what to tell you. Speaking of the Patriots offensive line, let's talk about the Houston Texans and the New England Patriots next. Texans win this game. We knew they were going to. 41-21. Let's look at the top 5 graded Houston Texans here in this one as they got the win. They're 2 edge rushers. We thought there would be a problem for the New England Patriots offensive line, and they absolutely were. At the top of the list, we got Will Anderson Jr. with a 91.2 overall grade. Edge rusher Danielle Hunter with a 89.5 right behind him. Linebacker Neville Hewitt with an 82.1. Offensive tackle Laramie Tunsil with a 77.3. And then safety Caden Bullock, another rookie safety. See, Dalton, I'm telling you, standing out on this list, 76.9 to round things out. CJ Stroud with a 76.8 grade in this game. On New England side of things, Devon Gottschalk with the top number for the New England Patriots in 89.0. Wide receiver Pop Douglas with a 77.3. Marte Mapu with a 77.2. Tight end Hunter Henry with a 70.4. And then linebacker Christian Ellis with a 69.9. Drake May in this game wasn't super pretty, but not all terrible. He had the beautiful touchdown throw to Pop Douglas, and he earned a 60.7 in his first start. What'd you think about this one? What's the stat that told the story, though?
Look, for me, it's always, anytime I watch the Texans right now, it's about C.J. Stroud. Look, they don't have Nico Collins. You're going to play the Patriots, who sometimes their defense is kind of spunky, but he is just he's so in control, it's ridiculous. I'm telling you, every time I watch him, I don't know why, I just think about Peyton Manning. I know I said it last week, but it just doesn't.
Peyton or Peyton?
Peyton.
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 There it is.
There it is. Yeah, anyway. Had to do it. Had to be done. Stroud, but yeah, no, look, 38 dropbacks. He only moved off of his intended launch point 4 times. out of 38. I mean, he's just sitting back in the pocket comfortable. And one of the interesting things is, look, Nico Collins through 5 weeks was the best receiver in football.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
He goes down. He's on IR for a bit. How do we respond? Can we adjust without him? We've got noted Patriot killer Stephon Diggs. We still have Tank Dell. We have Dalton Schultz. We get Joe Mixon back, right? He was really good. But for me, C.J. Stroud just doesn't – he's just not going to screw it up. I mean, I really think if we're making a top 5 quarterback list right now, he's got to be in it. He's just so he's just so darn good. I mean, and you talk about they saw more man coverage in this game because Collins was out and he was really the man beater. They saw more man coverage in this game than any other game they've played so far, okay? And they did kind of struggle when the Patriots went man-to-man. But when they did go zone, he took full advantage. He went 13 of 16 for 104 yards and a touchdown, 93.3 adjusted completion rate, and an 83.2 passing grade. Both of those numbers are season highs for him against zone coverage. He just kills you when he has the opportunity. It's like any time he needs to do it, he just doesn't miss. And you talk about he gives them such a high floor. Like, there are so few games that they can lose just because they have C.J. Stroud. It's like because they have him, they had zero chance to lose this game. That's because he's so in control, and it's so just calm and cool and precise from the pocket. I mean, he is one of those guys.
Yeah.
I got to be honest, that's a quarterback that you feel like, man, we always talk about who are those guys? Who are those guys that can actually win a Super Bowl? It just feels like C.J. Stroud's one of them. As long as Collins gets healthy and he's good for the latter parts of the season, good luck stopping him. Just nothing faces him at all. Oh, my number one receiver's out. He's been carrying our offense.
Right.
Yeah, we're fine. We'll go put up 40.
Well, it goes back to what we were saying before earlier in the show. You get a lot of teams around the NFL who go, okay, this is my top receiving option. We're running everything through them. And if they get hurt or whatever, the wheels fall off. You mentioned it, and I'm glad that you brought it up. Nico Collins was the highest graded receiver that we had in our system in the NFL. He had an elite year last year and came out this year and just showed that last year was not a fluke at all whatsoever, and he's an absolute stud. He was the number one graded receiver that we had. You lose him, any team in the NFL loses a wide receiver that is number one in the NFL, you're taking a step back in offense. And the Texans just didn't. Their EPA per play was still top 10 in the NFL this week. Diggs, Mixon, Dell, all at least one receiving touchdown. We talked about it in the preview show, or at least I talked about it with Carmen Vitale last Thursday. Tank Dell was my sort of plus factor in this game because if Tank Dell, who it was a natural product of, they say there's only one football, right? It can only go to so many players. You've got Stephon Diggs, you have Nico Collins, you have Joe Mixon now. Tank Dell was just on the back burner a little bit compared to what he was at the beginning of last season before he got hurt. And I said, okay, now that he's fully healthy, the numbers don't look as efficient or as good overall as they did for him last year. But with Nico Collins out, if Tank Dell steps right back into what he was at the early part of last year, this offense can get miss a beat, and they didn't. Now, I get it. It's the Patriots. They're not the best team in the NFL. They're not the most talented team out there on defense. But it was unbelievably impressive. And, again, getting to my most impressive, Joe Mixon, 13 carries, 102 rushing yards, a touchdown, 3 targets, 2 catches, 30 receiving yards, a touchdown. Now, he wasn't doing anything that was like lighting the world on fire. He didn't have any forced missed tackles in this one. His yards after contact was still just 2. It's not like he was a monster, beyond his responsibilities, or you hear people say rushing yards or receiving yards over expectation. When you look at sort of our stats that we like to lean on, again, the forced missed tackles and the yards after contact, he wasn't blowing the doors off with those, but still, it was a potent offense where it felt like nothing the Patriots were doing could possibly stop them. Now, what was your most impressive in this one? And then I do want to talk about Drake May, so we'll get into Drake May in a second, but your most impressive and most disappointing, I'll say, before we get into
First of all, it just feels like Joe Mixon is so important to them. I mean, the balance he gives them, and even what he gives them in the passing game is just super important. We've seen their offense when he's been healthy has been spectacular, but let me go on the defensive side. Those first 2 guys we mentioned at top 5, Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter.
Studs, man.
Man, oh man, this is what they pictured when they signed Danielle Hunter. This is crazy. I mean, Anderson, 87.6 pass rush grade, 8 pressures and 3 sacks. Hunter had an 83.5 pass rush grade, 3 pressures, 1 sack. They combined for over a 25% pass rush win rate between the two of them. Look, these 2 guys, is there a better pair of pass rushers in the AFC right now? I mean, this is a problem.
I not off the top of my head.
This is
every week they're good.
This is a serious problem come playoff time. And I know they swapped out Jonathan Grenard for Danielle Hunter, and we've talked about it was kind of a good scheme fit for both. Like, Hunter will be more comfortable here. Well, he's comfortable. I mean, and Will Anderson, there was some questions about, man, they just drafted Stroud second. Now they're giving up a haul to trade up to 3 for Anderson. Anderson's been worth every bit of what they traded for him. I mean, he is just – this is a superstar. This is one of the best pass rushers in the league. These are 2 of the best pass rushers in the league. And in tandem, this is a scary thought, I think, for teams in the playoffs in the AFC having to block these 2 guys, because I think there's going to be more days like this where you just can't do it.
Yeah, I feel like the only real argument to edge rush pressure in the AFC, the Steelers, right? Because of how well TJ Watt is playing, and then Nick Herbig,
they got
Alex Highsmith when he's healthy. But that feels like, off the top of my head, the only threat, really, or argument to Hunter and Anderson.
Bosa and Mack, maybe?
When they're fully healthy, I suppose, because Mack is still playing really well. We'll get to that game in a second.
These 2, Anderson especially, he's going to get in a stratosphere here pretty soon, because
I feel like he already is, man.
He might already be. I mean, he's ridiculous.
So Drake May in this game, 58.0 passing grade, 3 passing touchdowns, 2 interceptions. It was a situation where I think he struggled when pressure came up, and we knew that was going to be the case. 34.0 passing grade when he was pressured. He won big-time throw, 2 turnover-worthy plays, had an adjusted completion percentage, 65.6 in this game. I didn't think it was bad from Drake. I really did. To come out of that one, it was a game where you were very clearly outmatched. I just loved it. At least he had the big-time throw, right? At least he had the pocket is holding up for me. I got my guy one-on-one. I'm giving him a chance deep in the end zone, and he's coming down with it. And it's like that's the one pass that you really look at in this game. And he threw a lot of them, right? I think he had 36 total attempts. What do you have? 33 total attempts in this game. And so it's not just one pass, but that pass was sort of this is why he started. This is why we drafted him, to see a lot more of this stuff. And so it really was sort of the expected game from him. I don't think anybody was coming in this one thinking that he was going to shock the world to beat the Houston Texans. It was fine when he wasn't pressured. It was tough when he was pressured. He's playing behind an inconsistent offensive line. But to me, that big-time throw and the way that he was able to set that up and how great it looked, that goes back to the preseason of you see those throws and you go, all right, this guy's clearly the future. Let's get him in there sooner rather than later. It was a tough assignment for him to come in and play this kind of team early on, but I was at least happy that we got that one throw from him.
Yeah, and that throw, what's funny about that throw? That is only the 3rd Patriots passing touchdown since 2020 that was at least 35 air yards.
No way.
Yeah. It was one from Mac Jones and one from Cam Newton, and now one from
Cam Newton
and one from Drake May. The vertical element.
New England Patriots legend.
Yeah, I mean
Cam Newton.
So true. What a career he had in New England. But just that vertical element, and Drake May over the last 2 years has been the best vertical passer in college football, right? This is what they need. Now they do need the weapons and the protection to complement that, but that's what he can be. To me, it was always a Big Ben type of vertical passer that can launch it downfield on any play. Now, again, they just need more pieces. Hopefully they get better pass protection here pretty soon, because you'd hate to see something happen to him, and that was really the difference in this game. It's just he was under so much pressure, but the fact that he can work it downfield vertically, to me, is why now he's starting over Jacoby Brissett, because Brissett was just throwing the ball 4 or 5 yards every play.
Yeah. That's why he's in there. And like you said, I hope we get a fully healthy season from Drake May, because I think we're going to see a lot of really good progression from him, especially when we get into the back fourth. I would say those last 4 or 5 games of the season could be fun to watch for him once he gets super confident there. All right, we're getting into the 4 p.m. games, but before we do that, got to tell people that when you're hiring for a small business, you always want to find quality professionals to do the right role, right? That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. We do a lot of hiring here at PFF, obviously, and it's not just always about matching a resume and what somebody has done with these current, job asks and what you have up there. It's like, okay, this person can technically do this job or they have the experience. You got to find the right people for your business, right? LinkedIn Jobs, it's not just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't hire anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but Perhaps they're open to the perfect role. Sometimes I think that that's the best employees that you could find. In a given month, 70% of LinkedIn users don't even visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, simply put, you are looking in the wrong place. LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses, they get qualified for candidates within 24 hours. You hire a professional like a professional at LinkedIn. They know that, you guys are wearing so many different hats as small businesses. Sometimes you don't even have the time or the resources to make the hires that you want. That's why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for their hiring. You post your job for free at linkedin.com/PFF. That's linkedin.com/PFF to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Steelers Raiders. Here you go, Walt. I don't know if you were getting ready for it or if you're dreading it.
Well, we're here now.
But we're here. Pittsburgh Steelers win this game against the Las Vegas Raiders 32-13. In the chat, there were some people talking about where Davante Adams could get traded now at this point with the Raiders season. It feels like unraveling. I know there was talk last week about Davante Adams. Like, oh, okay, well, it feels like he didn't like Gardner Minshew. Now they went to Aiden O'Connell. He was like, all right, well, maybe I could come back. I don't know. Look, I think it's more likely he's traded than not. Just like the Emmanuel Forbes stuff. Let's get the trade rumors going. Where's Davante Adams going? You tell me. What team could use him or just where you would like to see Davante Adams? So as we talk about the Steelers and the Raiders here, you let us know where Davante Adams might be going. Pittsburgh, they won this game big, so we'll give them the honor of highlighting their top 5 graded players in the game first. Edge rusher TJ Watt, I mentioned, I don't think there's anybody doing it better than TJ Watt right now. 94.7 overall grade in this one. I saw he had a 99.0 run defense grade. Absolute stud. He's at the top of the list. Linebacker Landon Roberts with a 91.9. Running back Najee Harris with a 90.7. Defensive tackle Cam Hayward with an 86.4. And then wide receiver Calvin Austin with a 78.3. Quarterback Justin Fields in this one. Not his best game. Fine. They got the dub. 57.3. And then on the other side of things for the Raiders, guard Dylan Parham with a 92.5. Linebacker Devon Diablo with an 88.6. Edge rusher Max Crosby with an 84.5. Tight end Brock Bowers, 80.6. And then offensive guard Jordan Meredith with a 79.5. I mentioned not a great game from Aiden O'Connell. 38.6 overall grade in this one. So they make the switch from Gardner Minshew to Aiden O'Connell. Doesn't really make a big difference, especially not in this one against a good Steelers defense. But stats told the story, Dalton. What do you got?
I mean, it just kind of is Aiden O'Connell in general. A 39.1 passing grade with 2 turnover-worthy plays and 44 dropbacks, only 3 positively graded throws on the day. But look, Aiden O'Connell's making his first start. There's a lot of the quarterback controversy happening with the Raiders. Davante Adams isn't playing. Jacoby Myers isn't playing. I'm pretty sure Michael Mayer wasn't playing in this game either. I mean, you put Aiden O'Connell out there without most of his best weapons, and it's just Brock Bowers and not a whole lot else to work with against this defense. It's going to be a struggle. It's kind of predictable that this is the way this game would go. Now, props to the Steelers for taking care of business and scoring 32 points here, but this is just a shell of what the Raiders' offense was supposed to be. Zamir White, their starting running back, was out also. Offensively, I'm not really sure how the Raiders were going to score in this game, and you almost feel bad for O'Connell because it's like they just don't have, other than Brock Bowers, they don't have anything out there to work with right now.
It's not pretty.
It's not pretty at all.
I went into this game thinking, very simply, the team that runs the ball better is going to win the game. Because it's not like Aiden O'Connell, even if he was going to be better than Gardner Minshew, you weren't looking to win the game off of his arm. And Justin Fields has been playing very efficient. We've seen some good ball from him, even in the passing game. But still, a lot of what the Steelers want to do is predicated off of how they rush the football. 2 completely different teams here with running the football, and I think that's the reflection in the scoreboard. To me, that is the stat that told the story. Steelers, rushing grade in this one, 90.7. Raiders rushing grade, 41.7. It's just completely different, and the efficiency numbers match that as well. For the Steelers, 12 missed tackles forced per attempt. Raiders, 2 total missed tackles forced. Not per attempt. I shouldn't have said that. They weren't forcing.
That would be fun.
12.
That would be fun to watch, wouldn't it?
That would explain the elite grade, but we'd probably need to bump it up. 12 total missed tackles forced for the Steelers in the run game. Only 2 total for the Raiders. 1.2 yards before contact for the Steelers, 0.9 for the Raiders, 3.5 yards after contact for the Steelers, just 1.9 for the Raiders. It was simply a tale of 2 teams that wanted to run the football, and one of them ran it better than the other one. That's it. And then I think obviously the defensive side of things as well. Pittsburgh is better up front. They are a better defensive line. They can impose their will when the defense is out there a lot better than the Raiders can, especially with some of the injuries they have. I love how Divine Diablo played. I'll get to that in a second. But that to me is just overall the stat that told the story in this game. They wanted to run the ball. They weren't able to very well. You're most impressive in this one.
Well, I'll give an honorary one. That was the best game I think I've ever seen Najee Harris play.
He was great.
Pretty sure.
He was awesome.
I believe it was his highest graded game of his career. I think it was his first grade with a 90. So I'll shout that out. But listen, T.J. Watt did not have a single pressure in this game, and I'm still making him my most impressive. You don't see 99 run defense grades floating around. 5 tackles, 2 for a loss, 4 run stops, and apparently skip Charles Tillman. He's been working on this right hook with Mike Tyson, because you talk about punching out 2 fumbles in this game, in the run game. That's part of why that rushing grade for the Raiders was so low. And especially the second one. The one moment, the game was 22-7, where the Raiders had some hope down on the 1-yard line to punch it in and get it within 1 score and get some momentum. T.J. Watt just punches it out from, I believe it was from Alex Madison. And that was just the ball game right there with about 13 minutes left. I mean, T.J. Watt, even on a day when he didn't have a single pressure as a pass rusher, was still the best player on the field. I mean, it's just ridiculous, and I know there's always arguments about who's the best edge defender and who's the best defensive player. You could have all the arguments, number one, about what you want, but T.J. Watt's certainly in the top 3 or 4 without question, and it's because of what he does. It's what he does in the run and pass game, right? We see guys who are one-dimensional, and you go, man, I kind of wish they would do the other one better. There is zero question with TJ. I mean, you talk about punching out 2 of them. How many more guys now? Especially we mentioned Tyke Smith earlier. Mm-hmm. There was one in another game that I can't remember. TJ
Brian Branch. We'll get to him.
Brian Branch. Yep. That's right. I mean, how many guys are throwing these right hooks at these footballs and punching them out now? It's crazy.
I saw Will Blackman say this on Twitter. He's like, putting the ball in your outside hand is a lost art.
Yes.
And it is kind of.
I see let me tell you, so many backs in NFL and college now.
Put it in the outside hand.
They don't know what their left hand is. They have no idea. Especially in college, this used to be a thing that was taught when they were 5 years old.
Yes.
Outside arm.
Put it in the outside hand.
I see so many backs now that don't even know they have a left hand.
Yep.
I'm telling you.
It is so much more difficult to go fully across the body to punch the ball out. And because the second they start to come in, you have the ability to stiff arm
Even
them.
If you do it, the idea is the sideline. You have the sideline, so fine. It
gets
punched
of course.
Towards the sideline. Like, it kills me. Trevor, there's a handful of things that make my friggin' blood boil when I'm watching these games, and having the ball in the inside hand just kills me. Absolutely. And this is the exact reason. It is. And Watt on the second one, I think, did it on the outside because it's down on the goal line. He's just a freak. But it kills me more than like almost anything else on a football field. Like, please put the ball in your outside hand.
Yep. For me, I'll start with most disappointing, and then I'll go into my most impressive. Overall, for me, the most disappointing is just the Raiders defense. This is a unit that there were some metrics last year where they were top 15, even top 10, and I felt like this is going to be a feisty unit with Antonio Pierce there as the head coach, really motivating that side of the ball, how they played during the preseason. I thought that they were pretty impressive there, but Raiders defense, 53.4 defensive grade this season, 30th overall. They're 27th in the NFL in points allowed per game at 27.2. It's just not a good defense. Christian Wilkins been a little hurt, but I thought the addition for him would be great. And losing Malcolm Kuntz hurts, I think, a lot for this team. But it's just not good. It's just not good. And they're one of the worst defenses in the league, unfortunately. And I really did not see that coming. On a positive note, Divine Diablo had a great game. He was awesome in this one. 84.6 overall grade, 90.6 coverage grade. He had 6 tackles. He had a sack. He had an interception that was called back due to roughing the passer, but he was sick. He also had another dropped interception. So he was all over the field. The coverage grade was elite, like you said, for a 90.6 overall grade. And so it's been bad overall for this Raiders defense, but at least Divine Diablo was able to stand out, so I wanted to give him his kudos there. Real quick, most disappointing for you, and then we'll move on to the next one.
I just come out of this game still worried about the Steelers' pass protection and the James Daniels injury, obviously huge. Zach Frazier came out of this game with an injury early. Broderick Jones struggling at right tackle, and Justin Fields was pressured on 22 of his 36 dropbacks. Against a team that can score and take advantage of that, that's a huge problem. And Fields, look, I'm still into full belief, even when they were losing games, that Justin Fields should be the starter. I don't think there's anything wrong with Fields, but this offensive line was charged with 13 pressures in this game. It's going to be something to watch going forward. I know he's a great athlete, but their passing game, they don't have enough room to work with for their pass protection to not be better than this. So I know it's Max Crosby. I know this is some bad, Max Crosby against Broderick Jones is not a good matchup for Pittsburgh. But,
not great.
But this has been a consistent theme since last year, and I'm still a little worried about their pass protection.
Chargers-Broncos, next game I want to get to. The Chargers win this game 23-16. Divisional battle between these two teams. Talk about the Chargers' top 5 graded players. You brought up Khalil Mack's name earlier in the show. The ageless wonder still at the very top of this list. He had a 90.5 overall grade in this one. Offensive tackle Rashawn Slater back in the lineup, 82.0. Safety Elijah Molden with a 76.1. Wide receiver Quentin Johnson, a 74.8. And then offensive guard Zion Johnson with a 71.2. Justin Herbert, 62.9 in this game. Flipping on over to the defensive side, to the Denver side of things, safety Levi Wallace with a 92.0. Defensive tackle Malcolm Roach with an 87.1. Cortland Sutton, their wide receiver, their go-to wide receiver in all situations, it feels like. 85.3. Offensive tackle Mac Peart with an 81.7. And then Jonathan Cooper with an 81.6. Bo Nix in this one. It started off rough for the kid, but it ended pretty strong. He ends up with a 78.7 overall grade in this one, thanks to a red-hot fourth quarter from Nix to actually make this a game in the end. What'd you think about this one? What's the stat that mattered here?
It's those first 3 quarters. It's that rough start that we have to highlight because that's really what lost them the game, right? And you talk about the first 3 quarters of this game. They only ran 30 plays, which is not great for 3 quarters, and they only got 63 total yards out of it. 5 first downs in the first 3 quarters, 58.3 offensive grade. You had the Cardinals earlier as like the game you thought would go better. Mm-hmm. That was me this game with Denver. I actually really thought Denver was going to come in and their defense was playing great and they would win this game and they were starting to get it rolling. And for 3 quarters, they had nothing. It didn't help that Patrick Surtain got hurt at the very beginning. He's out with a concussion, or we'll see how long he's out. But this offensively, it just melted down for Denver for the first 3 quarters. Only 3 plays of 10-plus yards, all of them runs, 2 of them Bo Nix scrambles. They just kind of same as the Cardinals. Offensively, it was just not there. I know they found a little bit of juice late and made it look like a 1-score game, but this game was a lot more dominant by the Chargers than the final score would tell you because the Broncos in the first 3 quarters just could not move the ball.
Yeah, and I think that my stat that told the story here for the Broncos and sort of what goes into that is they're putting a lot on Bo Nix's plate. I think a lot of people obviously it was very easy to go after Bo Nix for the first half of what he was playing because it was like he had like 2.2 yards per pass. I mean, it was a terrible average through those first 3 quarters. But I don't think this has to be a constant. Like they want to run the ball better.
Well, look at the other 2 rookies, right? Look at Caleb and look at Jaden. And why do we keep saying keep saying their offenses look so good? Not just because they've been good, but there is balance and there's other good things going on other than just the quarterback's playing great. And this team doesn't have that.
And I mean, obviously, like the team's not rushing the football great. I see that both of us have the same most disappointing, so we can just talk about it here. Javonte Williams in this game, 41.9 rushing grade. 54.3 rushing grade just overall this season, so it's not that much better for the entire year. His yards after carry is still below 3. I mean, like, Javonte's just not the same player. Obviously, he's coming through a major injury that he's recovering from since he got into the pros, but he's not the same player that we saw at UNC. He has not been since he really became a full-time starter, especially after that injury in the NFL. And I think that that's really hurting them because they're forced to now put more on Bo Nix than you would want. Like when you draft Bo Nix and you see him at Oregon, sure, you could think that he could be more at the NFL level, but you wouldn't say that about the first 6 weeks. You wouldn't want the ball to be in his hands at all times in the first 6 weeks. You would have wanted a really good run game, a good offensive line, which the Broncos, most expensive offensive line in the NFL. They've got a stable of running backs that you would think that you would at least make it serviceable, middle of the pack in the NFL, and it's not. So now, it's understandable that you look at Bo Nix's statistics and some of his efficiency metrics and his grades and everything like that, and it's understandable why it's lower. Because there's more on his plate than there should be. And I think that's because, again, now going into the stat that told the story, it's the Broncos' rush game. 11 rushing attempts in this game from running backs. That was the lowest mark in the NFL in Week 6. Just 11 total attempts. Now, Bo Nix was able to do stuff with his legs, but if you take the Bo Nix stuff away, 11 total attempts from your running backs? This game's not that out of hand. You're playing the Chargers. It's not like they got a potent offense and they're lighting the world on fire. Run the damn ball. So, to me, it's just that's an issue. And then 110 attempts from running backs this season, just total. That's 25th in the NFL. Well, you got to be able to run the ball better. Sean Payton. I like Bo Nix too. I had him decently high on my big board. I like Bo Nix when he was at Oregon. I think he could be a decent pro and a good starting quarterback at the NFL level. You got to run the ball more. You got to have way more success. It's got to be more balanced than what it is right now. There is too much asked of Bo Nix, in my opinion. And to me, that's the stat that tells the story. Because with that being the case, you are so far behind the 8 ball when you get to that really good fourth quarter from Nix. Nix, I don't think it's just going to be this quarterback that comes out of the gate in the first and second quarter and lights the world on fire. If anything, it's going to be Sean Payton getting with him at halftime and saying, okay, this is what the team is doing. Here's how we adjust. And I think Nix's experience, he could go, okay, all right, I could do this. And they have a good second half strategy, especially like we saw getting down to the fourth quarter. But to me, they are not running the ball nearly well enough in order to have success, consistent success, I should say, offensively for this team.
And I was looking at this up front. You mentioned that offensive line, and I know they lost Lloyd Cushenberry in the offseason, but last year they were 4th in the NFL in run blocking grade, and this year they're 26th. I mean, they need to block people too. I mean, Javonte Williams can be a good player, and they've got Jaleel McLaughlin and these other backs, but you got to be able to block people. None of those guys are Derrick Henry or Christian McCaffrey, right? You have to be able to block people up front. If you've got the most expensive offensive line in football, you would think they're not going to be the 7th worst run blocking team in the league. So that's to me, I look at that and I go, okay, they have to block people. Their offensive line has to be better than it.
Right, and I think that's where people in the chat are saying, like, hey, the Chargers did a really great job. There wasn't really anywhere to run the ball, and that's sort of my most impressive here in this game. It's just the Chargers' brand of football overall. Their defense and just an offense that does enough behind a really good defense. They're number 1 in the NFL in points allowed per game at 13.2. They're 2nd overall in EPA per play allowed in how little it is. And then they're 11th overall in total defensive grade in the league. This is Jim Harbaugh and Jesse Minter coming in and being like, yep, I mean, this is just what we are going to be. We're going to be a well-coached team. We're going to have a fantastic defense. And offense, it always takes a little bit more time than defense does. But this year, I don't care who we got out there. We're going to be a good defensive team. So I don't want my Broncos rant to take anything away from what the Chargers did. And I'm giving them kudos.
And the Broncos played well for 3 weeks before that.
Right.
I mean, right? It's just sometimes you go out there and it just doesn't. Yeah.
Like you said, they've got to. You have to block people better.
Yeah.
You have to be able to run the ball better. So kudos to the Chargers, obviously, and their brand of football, which is working this season. But for the Broncos, you got to run the ball better. Most impressive before we move on.
You went the defensive route, and actually I want to credit Jesse Minter real quick for kind of taking over for a few minutes there as the interim head coach when Jim Harbaugh had his health scare. Thankful he's okay, obviously. But I'm going to go the offensive side, too, with Greg Roman. I try to find a way to pick like one coach or one coordinator a week. For me, it's going to be Greg Roman this week. I thought he came out with a really good plan. Look, they were not afraid of this Broncos defense. They came out in their usual stuff, 2 and sometimes 3 tight ends or a fullback, big Scott Matlock at fullback, and they're running the ball downhill on Denver. And the one thing that he took advantage of, okay, Denver's one of the highest man coverage rate teams in the league. Look at how the secondary's been playing, right? You have Surtain, you have Riley Moss, you got good players, but Surtain got hurt early in this game. And in the first half, especially, Denver was staying in that man coverage, and Greg Roman came in with a really good plan to beat it. Now, Justin Herbert in the game, 7 of 12 for 98 yards and a touchdown against man coverage, and in the first half was really the big chunk of that. 5 for 6, 75 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 big-time throw, and 82 passing grade against man coverage. There were just the way that Greg Roman was controlling this defense, right? They got the big touchdown. That was against man coverage. Then, the Broncos responded by going zone for a bit, and he was running on it and throwing screens and getting after the catch against it. Then they'd go back to man, and he'd have something else for the man coverage. Greg Roman really called a great game here, at least, especially in the first half. I know they didn't score but 3 points in the second half. I think it was 20-0 at one point. Mm-hmm. I know it slowed down as the game went on because the Chargers aren't generally that explosive, but I thought against this team and the way the Broncos run their defense, especially when Surtain got hurt and the Broncos, at least for the first half, kept staying in that man coverage, figuring, okay, we can't change the whole game plan just because he got hurt, which I get it, but that's also Patrick Surtain. I mean, that he kind of changes game plans. I thought Greg Roman did a really nice job early in this game of having a plan for a defense that, honestly, over the last 3 weeks was the best defense in the NFL.
I think it's a good shout-out. Lions-Cowboys. Lions. I mean, this is never a football game. 47-9. It just absolutely destroyed the Cowboys in this one. When you look at the Lions, top 5 graded players, I mean, it's a little bit of a somber recap here because number 1 is a guy who is a front runner for Defensive Player of the Year in Aiden Hutchinson. And if you were watching the game or saw the injury somewhere on social media afterwards, you know that his season is most likely done. 95.1 overall grade in this game. Once again, a dominant performance before he got hurt. Safety Brian Branch right behind him, a 93.3. Unbelievable game from him as well. Wide receiver Khalif Raymond with a 90.9. Running back David Montgomery, a 90.3. And then cornerback Carlton Davis with an 88.4. Jared Goff in this one, 72.3. And he didn't have to do much, honestly. On the other side of things for the Dallas Cowboys, linebacker Damone Clark with an 83.2. Edge rusher Chauncey Golston with a 73.4. Wide receiver CeeDee Lamb with a 72.1. Offensive tackle Tyler Smith with a 71.2. Offensive guard TJ Bass with a 69.6. And then Dak Prescott with a 56.4. Dalton, I do want to hear from you, but I'm going to be honest. I'm going to get mine out of the way really quickly. The stat that told the story, one of these football teams is good. The other is bad. That's basically it. The Lions are top 3 in EPA per play on offense, and they're top 10 in EPA per allowed on defense. The Cowboys are 23rd in EPA per play on offense, and they're 27th in EPA per play allowed on defense. One of these teams is good. The other one is bad. That's it. The Cowboys are bad at run defense. The Lions are really good at running the football. The Cowboys give up a lot of explosives in coverage. The Lions are really good at exploiting explosives in coverage. The Lions' offensive line is very good when it comes to mitigating a lot of pass rush things. The Cowboys don't have a lot going on there. The Cowboys' offense, they cannot run the football. The Lions are pretty good at defending the run. The Cowboys, they rely on shot plays. They got a couple of them, but the Lions knew that and they stepped up to the challenge. Whatever matchup you want to look at in this game, the Lions are a good football team. The Cowboys are a bad football team. That's what happened in this game, 47-9.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Yep, and honestly, other than their Browns win week 1 when they were fully healthy and playing the Browns, their last 2 wins against the Giants and Steelers were really just Dak Prescott finding a way to win. That's really the only way the Cowboys can beat you right now. And I want to credit, actually, the Lions coverage unit. They had an 88.5 coverage grade as a team in this game. That is their highest in 8 years. The Lions, this was the big weakness heading into the season, where I think last year they had the 3rd worst coverage grade in football. I believe they were 30th. It was the one thing. If they had even a decent secondary last year, they would have won the Super Bowl. And this is now moving forward with the Hutchinson injury. This is going to come more into the spotlight, right? And I'm going to wrap this in with my most impressive. Brian Branch is incredible.
Ooh, buddy.
2 interceptions, another guy with a right hook on a football for a forced fumble, a 93.2 overall grade there. And actually, the safety pair of him and Kirby Joseph right now, they're 2 of the 6 highest graded safeties in football right now.
I did not know
They're
that.
back-to-back number 5 and 6 in the safety rankings right now. Still figuring it out at corner, right? You got Carlton Davis over there. You got young guys, Terrion Arnold, Ennis Rakestraw figuring it out at corner. But the Lions are set at safety. And Brian Branch, his ability to move back and forth and deep half, single high in the slot, play man-to-man. He played a ton in the slot at Alabama. He's becoming one of the elite players in this league. He was terrific last year for them. The Lions up down the middle of their defense right now, they're set. We'll see if they need to go get another edge rusher or figure out something there. Obviously want to see Terrion Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw maybe emerge as a little, they're getting heavily targeted, especially Arnold. So he's kind of facing the rookie corner challenges, but Brian Branch is a monster. That's the best way I can put it. They're getting everything out of him that they envisioned when they drafted him. And again, Kirby Joseph along with him. If the Lions, not like this, to this extent where you're just shutting people out and winning 47-9, but if the Lions secondary makes real progress, they're not dead. I know kind of the thought right now is, well, with Aiden Hutchinson out, maybe they can't win a Super Bowl. But maybe you make a move for a pass rusher. Pass rushers are probably the easiest guys to trade for, right? When you talk about it's kind of been a recent history, right? The Rams,
sure, yeah.
The Rams did it with Von Miller.
Right.
Every team every year trades for Jadeveon.
Montez Sweat,
Jadeveon Clowney. They're the easiest guys to transition to a new team because it's like yeah, just get in a wide 9 and get after it, right? I mean, I would think they're going to be in the market for somebody. Their interior rush was spectacular in this game with Aleem McNeil, with DJ Reader, with guys like that. Owuzurike is playing really good. But the biggest thing is coverage. If their coverage can be significantly better than it was last year, and in this game they were just terrific, that's a big X factor for the Lions. Their secondary was a big thing I was watching coming into the year. So far, still working on it at corner, but it's a lot better than it was last season.
Yeah, I think that's we're just going to have to do a trade deadline special type of a show, because I think that this brings up a lot of interesting things. Like Jadeveon Clowney's name comes up. I understand that he just signed with Carolina, but like, okay, with where Carolina is right now.
Oh, the name that's
do you move him?
The name that was getting floated around a little bit. I don't know if they would actually do it, is Max Crosby.
I think every team in the NFL is very interested in Max
Crosby.
Well, right,
but just as a matter of, they're already looking maybe to, if they're looking to offload Adams,
right?
And you're really, I mean, the Raiders, they're in an in-between spot right now, and who knows where Crosby's at with where the franchise is at right now. But Crosby, that's always a surprise. Okay, but even if it's a guy like Clowney or somebody always comes available, there's another name I can't think of right now that should be in my head. I can't think of it, but no, I mean, you lose a guy like Hutchinson, that hurts.
No, it's no doubt. I mean, my most disappointing is the Aiden Hutchinson injury, just because it sucks. Again, this is the front runner for Defensive Player of the Year who just got hurt. So anytime that's the case, it really sucks. Most impressive, Tim Patrick. We talked about kind of the Broncos offense not playing really well, and we mostly talked about the run game. But I also feel like wide receivers outside of Cortland Sutton over the last couple of weeks we've been looking for something. I thought that Tim Patrick was a breakout candidate for them before they just released him. Just like, you're not really in the place to release him. And then he ends up going to the Detroit Lions, plays well, 3 targets, 3 catches, 68 yards, had a contested catch, 2 explosive plays. So he was a most impressive for me in this game. Most disappointing for you?
The Cowboys have issues on the offensive line as well. I know their defense, obviously they gave up 47 points. Their defense is getting a lot of the rap, but there's some real issues here. You've got, Tyler Guyton got benched for this game. They moved Tyler Smith out to left tackle, so already benching a first-round pick. 30.3 pass pro grade as a unit in this game. The Lions had a 65% pass rush win rate as a team, and it's tough. You've got a rookie starting at center. You had a rookie starting at left tackle who's now been benched. You were already struggling at right tackle. Zach Martin had the infamous 0 pass blocking grade in this game. He struggled badly with Aleem McNeil. The Cowboys they have just as big a problem on the offensive side of the trenches as they do on defense.
I'm looking at the chat right now. They're talking about some pass rush options. I also they're skeptical that Max Crosby gets traded. I'm also skeptical.
It would take a lot.
I just don't think they're going to move on from Trey Hendrickson, name that they threw out there. Although with the Bengals winning, I don't think they're going to move on from him. But he wants a new contract, so that part of it is at least interesting. But I don't think the Bengals are really in a spot where they can move on from Trey Hendrickson if they want to compete at all. Azeez Ojulari is one that got brought up. Azeez had a really good game last night. We'll get into that in a second. He's going to be one of my most impressive players. But he's at least somebody that you could supplement a little bit, right? Get him in there, raise the floor of how that defensive line is playing. So, I think that's an interesting proposition there. Last 4 p.m. game that we have, Carolina Panthers, Atlanta Falcons. This game was kind of close. And the final score 38-20 for the Atlanta Falcons. It doesn't look that way when it was all said and done, but it was close going into the fourth quarter. It was a 1-quarter game. People forget that. Not here, though. Atlanta Falcons, let's give them a shout-out for their top 5 graded players. Linebacker Nate Landman with a 94.3 at the very top of the list. Cornerback Clark Phillips with a 93.0 as well. Back-to-back guards and Chris Lynchman an 89.0, and then Matthew Bergeron with an 82.4, and then running back Tyler Algier with an 82.2. Kirk Cousins in this one, 68.7. Then when he flipped sides to Carolina, guard Damian Lewis was the top-graded player at an 80.4. Edge rusher Charles Harris, 78.0. Guard Robert Hunt with a 77.9. Center Brady Christensen with a 76.0. Cornerback J.C. Horn there at a 72.3. And then Andy Dalton, just a 59.2 grade. What was the stat that told the story here, Dalton?
The Falcons just ran the living hell out of the ball. It was their best day by far running the football. 198 rushing yards as a team. Season highs in rush yards, EPA per rush, missed tackles forced. They ran the ball on 38 out of their 68 plays, and I'm just going to wrap in the most impressive with it. Tyler Algier gets a bigger role the last couple weeks, taking advantage of it. And Bijan Robinson had a good day, too. I think he had 95 yards somewhere in there, but 18 carries for Algier for 105 yards, 9 forced missed tackles. It's angry. This was the game that, to me, looked a little more like, okay, we're really back to we run outside zone. We don't care that you know it's coming. And Tyler Algier is going to beat you over the head.
Hell yeah.
Right? And it's funny to me.
Hell yeah.
We talked before about, with Emmanuel Forbes, a regime that is not tied to a certain player they drafted. That is the case here as well with Atlanta and Bijan Robinson. And Bijan played a big role, all right? He had 14 or 15 carries for like 95 yards.
You say Bijan's on the trade block?
No, not at all.
Are you saying Bijan's on the trade block?
I'm just saying.
Are you Dalton Wasserman saying that Bijan Robinson of the Atlanta Falcons is on the trade block?
Absolutely not. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Okay, hang on here. Slow down. All I'm saying is it's not like the old regime, although the old regime didn't do this either, where, okay, we took him 8th overall and he's got to get 35 touches because that's where we took him, right? If 50-50 is working or 60-40 Algier is working, I think Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot are in the business of winning ball games, right? Not pleasing draft status and doing all that, right? And again, Robinson had a good day. I'm not saying at all that he didn't have a good day. He did. He had 95 yards, but Algier right now, he's always been a great zone runner, like when he was at BYU. The old system is actually, in the run game, not that different from this new system. They still lead the league in outside zone rate. I think maybe even at a greater differential than they did last year. They're trying to find a spark in this run game because they know their first 3 wins, they just won because Kirk Cousins willed them to wins. He should be in the MVP conversation right now because without Kirk Cousins, maybe they win this game, maybe not, but they would have started 0-5. They know they need to get this run game going if they want to win this division, if they want to get somewhere in the playoffs, even with Kirk Cousins in tow. Algier has been a spark plug for him. And you know what? If that's the case and it's a committee thing, I don't care about draft status. That one's the 8th overall pick and one's 5th round pick. Doesn't matter. Again, Raheem Morris, he's in the business of winning ball games. And if that means using both backs, using them. And if that means riding the hot hand, then so be it. I know fantasy owners are going to hate it and they're going to hate this rant, but that's also not my problem. I don't have Bijan on my team. So I had him last year, though, but won a trophy with him. This year,
if you do say so yourself.
I knew this was coming. Yeah, Algier's giving them a spark. This was their best day running the ball. Props to them for getting back to basics. Carolina's defense is usually a fix for some things right now anyway.
Yeah, Tyler Algier was RB12 in the 2022 class, and he never should have been. I had him as RB3 that year, right behind only Kenneth Walker and Breece Hall, and it's because of this. Because his play style was never going to go away.
When Zach Wilson was still at BYU with him,
yes,
Algier was, and Wilson was great when he was at BYU, but Algier was actually the engine of that offense because they could get 6-7 yards anytime they wanted.
Right. And they could run play action very, very well because Tyler Algier is not only a really good running back, he's the type of running back that if you don't bring your friends to tackle him, he will stiff arm you into oblivion. And so Tyler Algier is the true definition of when you run the ball, it affects the defense. This is not just like sometimes obviously having multiple guys in the box and being able to rally to the ball is obviously very important. But like if you have a team that you're running outside zone and it's mainly like a speed element thing, like sometimes loading the box doesn't really matter. Sometimes you just got to have the safeties. They got to pay more attention. They got to come down a little bit more. With Tyler Algier, it is you better load the box, because I'm not going down after first contact. And that is a defense-altering type of run style. And we saw that at BYU, and we're seeing it with the Atlanta Falcons, where when you put Tyler Algier on the field, the other team has to allocate heavier players there because you cannot tackle him. He is a little bit of a change the math type of a player, and that's why I loved him coming out of the draft. I thought it was crazy that he was a 5th rounder because he already showed us that at BYU. I didn't know if he was going to exactly be the player at BYU that he was going to be at the NFL level. I didn't know if he would get that opportunity. But very clearly, every time it feels like they give him a decent amount of carries, he rewards them for this reason. So I agree with you. Falcons are the most Falcons offensive line also most impressive for me. Lidstrom, 89.0. Bergeron, 82.4. McGarry, 80.5. Nazul, 78.7. Jake Matthews, lowest graded offensive lineman on the team at a 72.2. If Jake Matthews is your lowest graded offensive lineman in a week and he's got a 72.2, you are living. You are absolutely living. So the Falcons offensive line was really nice in this game. They were my most impressive. But now we do have to get to a little bit of most disappointing. And my most disappointing is the fact that the Panthers were hanging tough in this one. They were right there. We were going into the fourth quarter. It was an 8-point game. It was 28-20. Now, I didn't know if they were going to win this game, but obviously the game ending 38-20. It's a big difference. You're not able to do much at all in the fourth quarter on offense, but more importantly, your defense couldn't stop anybody. And when you look at the Panthers' defense, these were their PFF defensive grades by quarter. First quarter, 70.7. Second quarter, 53.1. Third quarter, 56.1. Fourth quarter, 31.4. I mean, they fell off that cliff in the fourth quarter. And then when you look at my most disappointing goes into their run defense as a team, 34.9 run defense grade. Average depth of tackle was 6.23 yards. That ain't going to cut it. Every time they're running the ball, you're not tackling them until they're at least 6 yards down the field. That's a terrible average, and you're really never going to win football games whenever that is the case. So for Carolina, the disappointing thing at this point is Andy Dalton is actually giving you a spark on offense. He is making them competitive every single week. They just don't really have the defense to be able to play 4 quarters. They played 3 in this one. They played 3 solid quarters, gave them a chance. It wasn't great. It wasn't a fantastic defensive performance, but they fell off a cliff in that fourth quarter. And that's what kind of is really disappointing about this Panthers team is how that defense can fall off a cliff. And that's an issue with the quarterback.
And they – first of all, I think there was a part of that fourth quarter, too. You're getting beat like that all day. You're running out of gas, right? And two – I think we just point out again, this is a defense without Derek Brown. And if there's any game going against Chris Lindstrom and this offensive line that you needed Derek Brown, it's this one without question. Yeah. So I'm with you. That's just where it's at. Is the Falcons? They just kept pressing the button and it kept working. And I think I know it's Carolina, and I know not every run defense is Carolina, but I think this is really a good step for Atlanta and where they want to go offensively.
Most disappointing for you, real quick.
I'm going to stay on the Falcons side just because. We know what Carolina is. We'll be talking about them all year still. The Falcons are still not getting a pass rush going, and for me, it's Matt Judon. Look, they gave up a third-round pick for him. He's only got 11 pressures this year. He had a 37.8 overall grade in this game. 1 cleanup pressure in 30 reps, and the Falcons as a team, look, he was supposed to jolt the pass rush and everything. Falcons as a team through 6 games have 5 sacks. I think it's still going to come to a head at some point that, look, when you're playing better teams than Carolina, you have to be able to rush the passer, and Carolina's actually been pretty good in pass protection, right? But you have to find it. You have to find some sort of pass rush. I don't know if they'll start blitzing more or what, but Matt Judon was brought in to be that guy that catalyzes that, and it really just hasn't happened.
Yeah. I'm looking at the chat, and they're talking about edge rushers. Sorry,
Do the Falcons need another one?
Well, no, they're talking about the Panthers that need an edge rusher. I guess they could be talking about the Falcons that need an edge rusher, too. I don't know if the Falcons are going to make any sort of deal because they made a deal for Matthew Judon, and it would be pointless for the Carolina Panthers to make a deal because they're just not that type of team. They're not going to be buyers at the deadline at all whatsoever. I also see people in the chat talking about the Detroit Lions when we brought up, hey, who could be an option for them? People were talking about Hassan Reddick, right? Hassan Reddick, he's with the Jets, but he's, it's a situation with the Jets. He's not even on the field right now. He fires his agent. Now he hires Drew Rosenhaus. Rosenhaus says he's going to get in there. They're going to figure it out. They're going to get him on the field. I don't know if what Reddick has been – obviously there's a lot behind the scenes that I don't know. But like the whole Reddick saga, I don't think that Brad Holmes and Danny Campbell are going to be very interested with what's going on right now with Hassan Reddick. So.
There's one that I wonder, and I want to look at something for this week. Where is he? On the kind of the other side of that, because – he hasn't been playing a whole lot and not doing a whole lot for Philadelphia. But what about Bryce Huff?
Bryce Huff, yeah.
It's a little I don't know how the contract stuff works with that.
Yeah, but I don't think Philly is at a point where they could trade anybody anyways.
But he's not doing a whole lot for them.
I know,
it seems that for some reason
that he does.
For some reason that fit is just not working, and they have plenty of pass rushers.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if Nolan Smith is going to start playing better. Maybe Bryce Huff, maybe. It's a thing. We've seen it in the past.
Yeah, I don't know. We got 2 more games. We got the Bengals and the Giants, and then we're going to touch on Thursday Night Football as well. Before we get to that, though, the NFL, they call it the world's greatest reality TV show because you never know what's going to happen. Every single week, there's so many things to keep up with, and to do that, we will be listening to a new podcast called The Offensive Line with Annie Agar. Annie is an NFL insider. You probably know her from those uncomfortable team meetings on social series that you probably see on TikTok, Instagram, all that good stuff. The Offensive Line with Annie kicks it back with NFL superstars, celeb, super fans throughout the entire season to unpack all the weekly lines, the odds, the spreads, with the usual brand of sharp wit and banter to cover everything that's going on around the NFL season. I know that trade deadline stuff is going to be must listen there as well. The pod is packed with all sorts of humor, and it's must listen to keep up with all the great NFL news and culture. You can follow The Offensive Line on the Wondery app or wherever you guys get your podcasts. You can also access bonus episodes and listen ad-free right now by joining Wondery Plus. So the Bengals win last night. They get a win over the New York Giants. Big win for the Cincinnati Bengals there. We'll take a look at their top 5 graded players in this one. Cornerback Mike Hilton at the very top of the list with an 82.8, and then wide receiver T. Higgins next on the list at an 81.4. Defensive tackle B.J. Hill with a 79.8. Wide receiver Jamar Chase 71.1, and then center Ted Karras with a 70.6. Joe Burrow would have been number 2 on that list, right behind Mike Hilton with an 82.3 overall grade. New York Giants edge rusher Brian Burns at the top of their list with an 87.8. Linebacker Bobby Okereke with a 75.0. Andrew Phillips back in the lineup here, 74.5 at number 3. Off and tackle Andrew Thomas. Man, it was a tough matchup with him going up against Trey Hendrickson all night long, but he still earned a 73.8 overall grade. And then defensive tackle Rakeem Nunez-Roches with a 73.4. Daniel Jones in this one, 54.5. Stat that told the story. Dalton, what do we got?
Simple. The New York Giants did not have a single play that went for longer than 15 yards. It's just without Malik Neighbors, there isn't any explosiveness. Daniel Jones on 10-plus yard throws, 2 for 8, 30 yards, and an interception. And he kind of ties into my most disappointing here is it's just the Giants, we're pretty sure they're going to be looking for a new quarterback in the offseason, right? I mean, there's just no explosiveness. There's nothing. And it's not that there's not maybe fast players out there, right? Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt. It's just Daniel Jones working down the field, especially without Malik Neighbors. It just doesn't work. And they're even in the run game, that just the lack of big plays. Tyrone Tracy had one explosive run for I think exactly 10 yards. Daniel Jones had a couple others because they got him going in the run game a little bit, but they just can't. It's so hard for them to work down the field, to work extended drives when they're going 4, 3, 6 yards at a time. And even in the passing game, when there's just no threat of them getting over the top without Malik Neighbors. Look, Daniel Jones is 5 for 21 on deep passes this year. 3 of those 5 are to Malik Neighbors. Yeah. That's pretty much just it. And he's not that force multiplier that's gonna throw guys open downfield and do all that. We saw it in the Dallas game. If they could complete any deep balls in that game, and they were open, a couple of them, they would have won that game. But their lack of explosiveness just kills them. And honestly, the receivers, when you're missing your number 1 receiver, it's hard. But to have just again, every play in this game for the Giants was 15 yards or less. Their defense was darn well good enough to win this game. Really, the score was 10-7. The last touchdown is what it is. You held the Cincinnati Bengals in the real part of this football game to 10 points. And just because they couldn't make any explosive plays, he's got a 63.4 passing grade on the year on 10-plus throws. It's just not working. They just cannot get the ball downfield at all.
Bengals defensive line was the stat that told the story here for me, because we have talked for weeks about how this is just Trey Hendrickson and no one else. And last night it was not. And over the last 2 weeks, and the Bengals playing really well. Obviously, they come up short against the Baltimore Ravens in overtime, but they could have won that game, and I think it's because of the rejuvenation of that defensive line. Trey Hendrickson is still playing well, but 65.4 overall grade for the defensive line specifically, so the edge rushers and the interior defensive linemen as a collective. That was the highest single game grade that they've had so far this season. Both the pass rush and the run defense was above 60 for the first time this season, which means the floor of the defensive line is getting a lot higher for the Cincinnati Bengals, which is very, very important. And then Sam Hubbard, B.J. Hill, 2 of their highest graded games of the season came in the past 2 weeks, which is huge because that means it's not just Trey Hendrickson and no one else. So to me, that was the stat that told the story, is for a team that was able to have explosives last week against the Seattle Seahawks couldn't really get that going, especially on the ground with Tyrone Tracy, and it's because Mike Hilton was flying to the ball and made a lot of good plays, but also the defensive line was holding up on their end of the bargain as well. So an improved Bengals defensive line, to me, signals that this team's not out of it yet. You cannot count the Cincinnati Bengals out. It's very frustrating how behind the 8 ball they are when it comes to record, but this is a team that's going to, I think, play their best ball moving forward, especially on the defensive line. Who's your most impressive and then most disappointing?
Most disappointing, Daniel Jones already went on that speech. That's just kind of where it's at for the Giants. Okay. Most impressive, I know it's a low-scoring game. It's Joe Burrow. Look, if they were 4-2 instead of 2-4, we would call him the MVP right now. He's the third highest graded quarterback in football.
I had him as my MVP going into the season, so that makes me mad.
Did we both take him? I don't remember.
Did you have him?
Did I take him as I think I did.
I know I had him.
I had him for that 5,000-yard season. I remember that part.
Yes.
But
on your bold call.
It's just you know what? One of the signature games of his career was the Titans game in the playoffs when he was sacked 8 or 9 times, and that game was kind of low scoring, and he just keeps his cool, and he does what it takes to win, right? That's what the great ones do. We saw Brady do it for so long. We see Mahomes do it almost every week. Joe Burrow has that as well. This was an ugly game. The Giants' defensive line is really good. Brian Burns was on an absolute burner, no pun intended. Dexter Lawrence is always great.
Yep.
And Burrow just keeps it going. Look, got a 47-yard touchdown run because he sees, man coverage and nobody's spying, and I guess they're just going to leave half the field open. He makes big plays. He doesn't get enough credit for how well he improvises all the time. And let's be real, when the Giants didn't get the pass rush going, 16 of 19 in a clean pocket for a $163 and a 91.5 overall grade in a clean pocket. This is what Joe Burrow does. I mean, if there's any doubt that he's an elite quarterback, I'm not sure what part you're doubting. I mean, he's just one of the, 3 or 4 best quarterbacks in the league. And teams like that don't usually get off to these types of starts and they're usually at least in playoff contention, right? So if the Bengals are going to get back in this, obviously Burrow's raging hot right now. This game, not a lot of points, but he was still the best player on the field. The defensive line's a huge key because that was the one problem that I wasn't sure that they were going to fix. Their passing game was going to get fixed. They needed T. Higgins healthy, plain and simple, right? And they needed Chase to get in a rhythm after the contract stuff.
Right.
That was easy. Their offense was going to come. If the D-line can stay at least decent, and this isn't the best O-line they were playing in the Giants, but if they can stay at least decent and be good enough and make enough stops, the Bengals can work their way back into this because they have an MVP caliber quarterback.
Yeah. Look, I agree. I think that Joe Burrow is playing incredibly well, and it's...
You could argue they're 2-4, and they're this close from being 6-0. They've been right there in every single game they've been playing. And other than the New England game, they didn't score because they didn't have Chase or Higgins, I don't think. The other games, the other 3, they should at least be 5-1, just if the defense played any better at all.
It's a frustrating team, but I think they're going to play better moving forward. We'll just see if they're too far behind the 8 ball yet to make the playoffs. But if they do make it into the playoffs, I think they're going to be one of the hottest teams that's in there. Most impressive, full transparency, I wrote my notes before you did, so I had Azeez Ojulari because I thought you were going to do Brian Burns. I was leaving Brian Burns for you. But
no,
I want to the chat. Drake in the chat saying hey, you got to talk about Brian Burns.
Don't ever forget I could default to a quarterback.
No, and
I will find a reason to.
No, the Joe Burrow call was a good one, obviously, but I'm just saying, I had Azeez Ojulari in there, thinking that you were going to take Brian Burns because we had to talk about Brian Burns. But I'll talk about both.
Take the whole crew then.
Most impressive Giants defensive line. There we go. No Kayvon Thibodeau in this one, so Azeez Ojulari I think really stepped up. 67.2 overall defensive grade, which was his highest of the season. He had 2 sacks, 6 pressures, and an 11.5 pass rush win percentage. But, we got to talk about Brian Burns as well, who had an 87.8 overall grade in this game. That was the 3rd highest, or I believe that was the 6th highest overall game grade that he has had in his entire career. And then when it comes to the 80.1 run defense grade in particular, Brian Burns has not always been great at defending the run. So that is the 3rd highest single game run defense grade that he has had in his career. So this is somebody who was all over the field. He was doing exactly what he needed to do, especially in run defense. This is a 3-down edge rusher. And this is the player, Chris said, first name basis, Chris Collinsworth, obviously, said last night on the broadcast, these are the games and this is the performance of why you traded and why you signed Brian Burns. He was able to have a massive impact, and That defensive line, I think, tried to do what they could do to make this a football game. But ultimately, when I look at the most disappointing, to me, it was just the Giants finishing drives. It felt like this was a defensive battle going back and forth. You mentioned some of the lack of explosives that the Giants had. It felt like the Bengals could have had more explosives themselves outside of the long Joe Burrow run earlier in the game. But really, when you look at it, Giants were 1 for 2 in the red zone. The Bengals were able to capitalize in the red zone, and then the Giants were 0 for 2 in field goals. Bengals were able to capitalize their field goals. That's kind of just what it came down to, right? Yeah, the missed field goals and the lack of capitalization in the red zone, that's the 10-point difference in a 17-7 game. And so that was, to me, the most disappointing there for the Giants, being able to finish those drives and make it a little bit closer, maybe even get the victory here for you. But, yeah, so that's my thoughts there. Last game that we're talking about here, 49ers, Seattle Seahawks, return the clock back to Thursday Night Football a little bit. The 49ers got the win in this one, 36-24. Let's take a look at the top 5 graded players for the San Francisco 49ers. Guard Dominic Pooney with a 87.8. Strong performance there for the rookie starting at guard. Tight end George Kittle next on the list with a 79.7. Wide receiver Deebo Samuel next with a 78.9. Safety George Odom with a 78.9 as well. And then cornerback Renardo Green got himself an interception in this game, 76.7. And then Brock Purdy, 76.5. On Seattle's side of things, Charles Cross, their offensive tackle, with an 82.7 at the very top of the list. Cornerback Devon Witherspoon with a 76.7. Defensive tackle Jerron Reed with a 74.1. Leonard Williams with a 71.3. And then linebacker Jerome Baker with a 70.8. Geno Smith in this one, a 66.3. Real quick, we're kind of going through this one a little rapid-fire style. Stat that told the story here, Dalton.
Seattle, 47.9 team defense grade. Their defense has been struggling since the second half of last year, and those struggles, outside of Week 1 against Denver when they forced Bo Nix into some turnovers, it's been a struggle. Since Week 9 of last year, they're 24th in defensive grade, and actually since Week 2 of this year, they are 28th, and a concerning thing for me. We knew they kind of struggled. They were trying to figure it out in run defense, but over the last 5 weeks, they're 29th in the league in coverage grade, and this secondary last year was playing a lot better than that.
For me, the stat that told the story is Brock Purdy. I don't understand it. I really do believe this, and this is actually more of a credit to Brock Purdy than anything else. I think he's got the worst arm strength of any starting quarterback in the NFL. I don't think there's a starting quarterback right now that has worse arm strength than Brock Purdy. And yet, he's playing like a top 10 quarterback in the league every single week.
It ain't all about arm strength.
No. It's not.
It ain't all about traits.
That's why he's Mr. Irrelevant. I was talking in a football group chat that we have, and Arif Hassan, who writes for the Wide Left Substack, he was saying it feels like Purdy some games feels like 2015 Peyton Manning, where the arm is nowhere close to some of these other quarterbacks in the league, but he's anticipating so damn well. I mean, there were at least 3 throws that I can think of off the top of my head where he is popping up lollipops to the defense, but he's doing it so fast, and the defense they can't even get over to the football, even though it's just barely getting there to the wide receiver. And I feel like I see a handful of Brock Purdy throws like that every game, and yet defenses don't make him pay. And it's because he is so far one step ahead of the game when it comes to anticipating where he needs to go with the football. He's also excellent under pressure, 75.6 passing grade under pressure, 70.1 on third down in this game, a big-time throw. And so Brock Purdy, man, it doesn't look like it's going to look with most other quarterbacks in the NFL, but he's getting it done. And you got a hat tip to him for how well he sees the game and how well he understands the game.
His instincts, you can always tell at any position, just guys who just have a different level of football instinct, right? I mean, you can go back on guys, defensive guys like Ray Lewis or Troy Polamalu, or certain guys on the offensive side who are just so cerebral, like Larry Fitzgerald. Like at quarterback, there's those guys too. Brady had them. Obviously, the greats, Peyton Manning had it, right? Brock Purdy just has instincts off the charts. You're right. Especially when he's improvising, it doesn't make any sense. Because some guys, you have physical freaks, right? Like Lamar stiff-arming people and Josh Allen doing what he does with all the physical tools. Just for some reason, it just feels like there's stretches of games where anything Brock Purdy does works. And you don't really, like you mentioned, you don't know why it works. It just works. He's just got such a high level of football instinct that just good things happen. I don't know. I don't know if there's some sort of voodoo around him or what. It's just something good always. It feels like with Brock Purdy, something good always happens. You're like, oh no, and then it's just, oh yeah, it's Brock Purdy, right? It's gonna be fine.
My most impressive in this game, rookie cornerback Renardo Green getting the start because Charvarius Ward was a late scratch with a knee injury. 66 snaps in this one for the rookie, 50 coverage snaps. 76.2 overall coverage grade, 11 targets against him, only 5 catches allowed, gave up 57 yards. Did give up a touchdown, but had an interception himself. 92.7 coverage grade in single coverage, which is important because, that's a matchup that the Seattle Seahawks like to feast on, but it's something that Renardo Green also did very, very well at Florida State, specifically playing in single coverage, man coverage situations. And when I watched him at the Shrine Bowl, it was the same thing, man. He was the guy in the one-on-one drills and the team drills. He was the guy in man coverage who was locking down whoever their number one was on the other side of things. So it's the exact role that he was ready for. They put him in a good situation, and I thought you saw him shine because of it. Most disappointing real quick for me, it's Stone Forsythe, their offensive tackle. I know they're kind of down to like offensive tackle option number 4, no Abe Lucas, no George Fant, but Stone Forsythe, man, it's tough. He is a major weak link for that offensive line. 10 pressures allowed versus the 49ers, and that was a mark that was top 10 or bottom 10, however you want to look at it, when it comes to most pressures allowed in a single game this season, 10. And his 12 pressures allowed against the Lions in week 4 are the most. So he is now in possession of 2 top or bottom 10, again, however you want to look at it, games where he has given up the most pressures in a single performance. It's hard to win when somebody is that much of a weak link for you.
And you just mentioned the two teams there that line up their best guy on that front side over the right tackle. That's Hutchinson, and that's Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa, I believe, had 14 pressures in this game, which is filthy. And did Hutchinson have what? Was that the game he had 15?
45? I don't know.
Whatever it was.
You said a number in the 30s.
Yeah, I mean, that's a Hutchinson and Bosa going against Stone Forsythe is tough. You feel for him with those matchups. Most impressive, fun story. I'm sitting somewhere watching this game with our good friend Dave Silfaro, and I told him, I said, Dave, I graded these games. I was a grader for 3 years, and I kind of know how these things work. And I'm sitting there watching big number 77 at right guard, Dominic Puni, and I was like, Dave, he's grading 90. He's grading 90 in run blocking. I guarantee it. This is just nasty. It felt
he's
like
got the eye of the grader.
I was literally like, I just know this is going to be a disgusting level of run blocking grade, and he got a 90.3 in that. 10 positive grades in run blocking for him. I'll tell you what, they found an absolute gem. And moving him, he played left tackle at Kansas last year too. For him to be this good at right guard, I think it's over the last 3 or 4 weeks. Trevor, we got a stat behind the scenes that's called run blocking impact percentage. Mm-hmm. Okay, and it's the percentage of positively graded blocks over your total amount of run blocks. His over the last 4 weeks is it's a little bit above 25%. And to get an idea on that scale, it's kind of, you're having a rough time if you're around 10 or under, okay? Average hovers around 15. The really good guys are at 20, and then you get maybe like 3 or 4 guys that hover around 25%. His are above 25% the last 4. He is just mauling people in the run game, and his level of athleticism getting to the second level is off the charts. It is just, man, oh man, what he's doing for them right now at right guard honestly could be because the rest of their offensive line outside of Trent Williams has been an issue.
Well, now they got maulers on both sides. They got a right guard and they got a left tackle.
He could be an actual difference if they are to win a Super Bowl this year as a rookie. I'll tell you, I know Rookie of the Year is going to a skill player or quarterback or whatever. Mm-hmm. This guy should at least get some sort of just acknowledgement of like, oh, wow, they have like a primetime right guard now all of a sudden that they drafted in, the 3rd round, I think they got him. I mean, he's been spectacular. And I knew watching that game, I was like, oh, that's a baller. This is a whole new problem when you're playing the 49ers.
Most disappointing. Then we get out of here.
We're getting the Geno Smith deep ball regression. The last 2 years, he was the best deep ball passer in the league, highest grade. I think he had a perfect 99.9 over the last 2 years, and it's getting to be a problem now because it can be high variance, right? Throwing deep balls, chucking it down the field. They're low probability plays. 1 for 7 on deep balls in this game. 81.4 deep passing grade for the season, which sounds great, but it's actually 14th in the league. It's a thing where the best part of Seattle's offense the last 2 years was Geno and Metcalf and the deep ball and making big vertical throws, and it's not coming as often this year, and their offense is kind of suffering for it because they don't do a whole lot else at an elite level. That was the thing that really separated their offense the last 2 years. and now it's not elite. Even if it's average now, I think they have a problem if Geno's deep ball is going to be kind of not what it's been the last couple of years.
There we go. Every single game for week 6, -1, officially reviewed and graded there for you guys. Appreciate everybody watching the show. We got one more game. It's Monday Night Football. If you guys don't have a PFF subscription, now would be a great time to get one. You get a PFF Plus subscription over at PFF.com. You can check out all of the premium stats that we talked about here on this show and so much more. When we get into draft season, when we get into fantasy football season next year, obviously you're signing up for this thing. It's a year-long subscription, and you get so many benefits every single year or every single season of the football calendar, not just during the season, but draft season as well, fantasy football season, all that good stuff. So go check it out. Get yourself a PFF Plus subscription over at PFF.com. For Dalton Wasserman, I am Trevor Sikkema. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening to the PFF NFL show. Grades release show here for week 6. We will see you for week 7, same time next week. See you guys then.